I would like to call to order the City of Lake Forest School District Number 67 Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, February 28th at 2012. We did hold an executive session at 5 p.m. May I have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Andersen,
Present.
Mrs. Fisher,
Present.
Mr. Julian,
Here.
Mr. Pinderski,
Here.
Mrs. Rose,
Present.
Mr. Schuler,
Here.
Mrs. Wold,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. And welcome to our audience. It's nice to see a full room. I would like to start with the President's report and basically just share with you the Board of Education liaisons and how board members, I'm not sure all of you are familiar with this role, but it is an APT position. And each school has 2 representatives that serve on the APT as the Board of Education liaisons. They regularly attend our board meetings, and they report back to their APTs about the work of the board. In addition to that, 3 times a year, the liaisons meet together with Dr. Griffith, Ann Whipple, and the board president, myself. And prior to this meeting, they gather questions from the parents at their schools and go over those questions from the parents. So this provides a consistent opportunity for two-way dialogue with our parent leaders. The topics that were covered in January, we held the meeting on January 25th at 9 a.m. And the topics discussed were 21st century skills and a discussion about the appropriateness of using technology in schools, the format of our half-day kindergarten. There were questions about whether or not it would be extended to include lunch and recess, which it will not be. Discussion about the reason why netbooks were chosen over the iPads, and primarily that was because of the need for a keyboard. And questions about, does the high school track which colleges and universities Lake Forest students get accepted to on their website? And they do. It's on the high school website. In addition, concerns were shared about the current netbook savvy 5th and 6th grades and how it will work when they transition to the high school. So we will be having another one of those meetings in probably April or May, I would presume, Dr. Griffith. And that concludes the President's report. Thank you. Moving on to the Superintendent's report.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, and members of the audience, thank you for being here tonight. Just a couple of quick things. First of all, congratulations to our schools, our faculty, our families. The State Board of Education is commending our schools for sustaining academic excellence as defined by our scores on the state ISAT scores, the Illinois standards for academic testing that we have every year. And so it requires a minimum of 90% of our students meeting or exceeding state standards. So congratulations to our students. And then secondly, I think we should do a shout out to the APT for their book drive that they had. I'm not sure many people yet know that our District 67 APT book drive was a huge success, as more than 20,000 children's books were collected and donated by District 67 students. So let's thank our families for that. The books will be donated to the Bernie's Book Bank, and then from there will be distributed to families that have need of books, and schools too. So congratulations to the APT for that. And then finally, on a very different note, I would just like to issue from the bottom of our hearts condolences to the family of William Lesgario-Tuskowski. There was a tragedy this morning in the Lake Forest community when one of our students, there was an accident with a train this morning. And so our deepest sympathies to the family, and as well as from the rest of the Lake Forest community, mourning the loss of this wonderful student. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Griffith. This brings us to public participation. At this time, we're going to have public participation about any topic other than the Ron Safer independent report. So if anyone would like to address the board on any other topic, please come to the microphone, identify yourself by stating your name and address. And we're going to limit it to 3 minutes tonight, okay?
Hi, Michael Beecham, 630 Meadowood Drive in Lake Forest. I just have a question. Will Mr. Safer be taking questions
Yes.
after his report?
Yes, he will. I'm sorry, I meant to say that.
Thank you.
Doug Morrow, 1806 Bowling Green Drive, Lake Forest. Here's a concerned citizen. I've noticed that we have secured our buildings during the day. We have TV cameras and buzzers to get into the building to protect our kids. We also have high-speed data links between all the municipal buildings and the schools. So I was surprised, and I live by the Everett School. I was very surprised to read that Everett School was broken into with $20,000 of computer equipment taken and the office vandalized and petty cash stolen. I'm surprised with all this technology that we didn't know about this until a teacher came by to see it, and I'm wondering what's being done to improve the physical security of our schools when the kids aren't there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This is the first major vandalizing that within memory, decades. And we do not have cameras around the facilities, our elementary schools, nor the middle school. We do at the high school. We have about 120 cameras at the high school. So the board operations committee will be meeting. There's 2 board members here tonight, and as well as some of our parents who serve on the committee. And we're going to be making a recommendation to address this for all of our schools. Because of the material and the purchasing that's involved, this would be a summer operation.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Debbie Dent, West Old Elm. As a mother, I am very much grieving right now as my children are at home today. And this is the second suicide in 50 days. And then there was another one about a year ago. It's very, very disturbing to the town and to the kids. Years ago, I raced to Dr. Griffith and many officials, and I have no idea whether there's any causation, but if somebody's committing suicide the morning of final exams, it seems more than a coincidence that it might have been driven by stress of school. I would like to request that this school district do what I requested Dr. Griffith to look into 7 or 8 years ago, which is whether there can be a way that to take some of the stress off of our students. There is a lot of waste in the homework that they are giving and everything else, and this town has paid no attention to it. So I ask if there could be something done, and maybe if there could be some sort of suicide hotline set up, or kids to kids, something that I did in high school, and it was very effective. We had a hotline, and it was anonymous, and something for the kids. That's what it's all about. Thank you.
Thank you for that input. And I think we're all grieving. It's a very sad thing to lose a member of our community. Okay, so that brings us to the end of public. Oh, yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've lived in this community for about 50 years, a little more than.
Sir,
Pardon?
can you please state your name and address?
My name is Jack Ingersoll. I live at 1130 North Green Bay Road in Lake Forest. I've lived here for about 50 years, a little bit longer than that. During that time, I've never seen a financial report of any nature from the city or from the school boards, similar to what a corporation would put out, where you list the source and application of funds, the payrolls of the major salaried people, very similar to a P&L and a balance sheet that a corporation has to put out. Are any of you familiar with a corporation? Do any of you work for a corporation? Do you understand what I'm talking about? The city says that they put one out, but they never really, it's put out on your computer, but they never send it out to the public. And I think it's time, we're all stockholders in the city here, and we pay the taxes, and the schools are really probably where most of our taxes go to. And I think it's about time that we get a financial report similar to a corporation. I come from the corporate world. I've run a corporation. And if you have problems with it, I'm sure there's people in the community that can help you devise the report. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Do the rest of you?
Sure. Do you want me to just to field this one? I'm Jeff Pinderski, and I'm chair of the Finance Committee. And we have a very detailed budget, which is posted annually. And then month by month, we report variance to the budget, sources and uses of revenue, and then we go through an annual audit process.
Do you list plant and equipment, assets?
Oh, yeah. So where's Alan? Alan, why don't you grab a microphone? Alan is essentially our CFO, and the similarities between what's done here and what happens in there's a lot of similarities between what happens here and what happens in the corporate world. Our chart of accounts is prescribed, and we have a few extra rules. It's kind of the municipal equivalent of Sarbanes-Oxley. Is that fair to say? So would you just take a minute and introduce yourself and address that?
Well, Jeff, let me help. Sir, Alan Albus is our Director of Finance for the school district. Everything that you're asking for is on our website, but if Alan could connect with you, he can go over all that with you, and you can assist him by looking at that. So.
Well, as you're all aware, we receive this almost monthly or quarterly a little thing from the mayor that really says how the city's doing and all that sort of thing. Why can't you, at the year end, give us a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement, and also a source and application, the salaries of the top 10 people in the school district, so forth and so on, all the fringes, our unfunded pension liabilities, so forth and so on, so that we set out what we're facing in the school district. I think that's especially critical in these times where most cities are having budget problems.
Are you starting from the point presuming that this is not being done, or do you think the issue is
I've never seen any.
Excuse me, or is the issue do you perceive the issue as a communications issue?
I think it's probably a communications issue, and I sort of suspect that a lot of the information that we need isn't provided. But it certainly should be something that is mailed to the residents instead of putting on a computer and so forth. Some of the older people, I'm 84 years old. I don't use one of those things.
I think maybe the issue is this
Pardon?
information is online, and maybe what you're asking is.
But I want it for the entire community so that they can see it. Do you see? As I understand, the greater portion of our taxes go to the schools in the city. Is that correct? Then we should know how that money is spent. What is the budget? Is it 10 million? Is it 20 million? What is it? What is our capital equipment? Where's the money going? Where's it coming from? What is our unfunded pension liabilities here?
We have all that information, sir. Alan can give you hard copies of that, and it sounds like you're also saying you would like to see.
I don't want it for me. I want it for the public.
Okay, and it is also contained on our website.
Is there any problem giving that to the public?
No, we have no problem giving that to the public.
Could you do that?
We do, yes.
Will you
It's
do
on
it?
our, it's
Yeah,
on the website, and if you want a copy for yourself, we can give you a hard copy.
So here's the trade-off, right? A few years ago, we published a lot more of this, which is expensive, and did a lot of mailing and physical communications. And the decision was made, if we put more of that online, we can redirect more of those resources to the classroom, which I think is kind of the goal.
Well, that's the same argument that was given to me when I mentioned this at the city, and yet the city has enough money to send out the mayor's message and so forth. All I'm asking for is a report once a year. Do
Okay.
you see what I'm saying?
Thank
Yeah.
you. I think you made that very clear. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right. We are now moving to our reports, and starting with the National Common Core Curriculum Standards. Dr. Griffith?
Okay, board members, brief report tonight on the emerging National Core Curriculum Standards and the new testing program for the state of Illinois that is going to affect every school in the state. Dr. Andy Henriksen and a couple of teachers are here tonight. We're very pleased that you'll be able to say a few words to the Board of Education about this. But over time, this is going to become a very, very large topic in our school district.
Thank you, Dr. Griffith, board members. Common Core Standards came about basically in reaction to No Child Left Behind failing. I'll be real blunt. This started in 2001, and the goal was very good. All children, 100%, will meet or exceed state standards by the year 2014. And as a result of that act that began in 2001, districts like ours, all across the state and all across the nation, did a lot of wonderful interventions for students that needed additional help. So there was a lot of good in this act. But as you'll see with my bottom point down here, No Child Left Behind measure 98.5% of all Illinois high schools right now are considered failing high schools. 98.5% of them because of this act. And we know that's not true. Our own high school is an exemplary high school, one of the best in the state, highest ACT in the state, and yet it too is being considered by NCLB as a failing high school. So you can see how this act needs to be changed. The Illinois Standard Achievement Test was the measure of NCLB for these 12 years, and until 2014 it will continue to be. This year, or this past spring, 96% of our Lake Forest 67 students met or exceeded Illinois state standards of learning. And yet, however, by NCLB standards, our 67 this year for the first time is a failing district as well, which is ridiculous. So, we're ready for some change. The governors got together and decided state standards, 50 different models across the nation, wasn't working. Different rigor, different quality of education among the states. So they wanted Common Core Standards, and this is what they wanted. They wanted readiness for college and career. They wanted consistent learning expectations. So far, 46 of the states have adopted the Common Core Standards, including Illinois. They wanted higher level thinking, problem solving, and to a degree some of the 21st century skills that we've been talking about here. And they wanted to create both formative and summative assessments. I'm going to talk a little bit about how this relates in math, language arts, social studies, and science. We brought some subject experts here to tell you about how they see it relating to their curriculum as we revise curriculum in the years ahead. In math, these are the guiding principles. And I won't read them for you, but as Sean Weber comes up, 6th grade math teacher, you can keep these in mind that the focus is getting kids to think more deeply, and more concretely, and seeing more relevance in what they're learning, so they're more engaged. And Sean is actually doing that now, so that's why I chose him. For that, or do you want to talk first?
All right. Excellent. I got to tell you, the 12-year-olds aren't as intimidating as you guys right now. But I'm excited to talk about what we're doing in the classroom today. I want to show you what we're familiar with. Now, we have a worksheet of something that we're more...
Talk in the microphone for the TV
Okay.
audience.
All right. I'm going to show you, on our agenda today, if you flip it over, you see a little math. Well, here's a little math for you, and this is the math we're more familiar with. It's more of a traditional worksheet. This is what we would have normally taught. It's 2.5 divided by 4 1/5. And this is the math that we are, again, more familiar with. But Common Core is asking us to change that and look at it differently. It's not about helping. When I first got into teaching, I was told that I'm going to have a classroom of sponges, and I need to pour knowledge into them so that they can use that knowledge to do different things. But I'm finding out that really them being aware of the knowledge, them being aware of the algorithms aren't really going to help them move forward. They'll have them, but can they use them? What we're asking ourselves, and Common Core wants us to do, is to be more of knowledge guides. That's the best way to look at it. I want to guide them through their journey of learning. Common Core and this Parks assessment that's coming up is asking us to seek a deeper understanding and more of an abstract application of these skills. Common Core wants students to do these different things. Can I come back to the other one? Well, we want our students to not just look at these and have rules and algorithms, but they want us to make sense of problems. They want us to persevere when they solve them. They want us to ask students to reason abstractly and quantitatively. They want us to construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. This is a pretty big task. I'd much rather have them take a worksheet and just use the rules. That's actually easier to teach. It really is. It isn't as much fun, and it really isn't really interesting at all. But to do these things, I think, is an amazing task and an amazing opportunity for our kids. Right now I'm in a pilot program that Andy talked about. In our pilot program, I didn't lay this worksheet down in front of them. What I laid in front of them even today was a recipe for a trail mix. And it only serves 6 people. And we had to figure out a way to get this to serve 32 people. But the students, we looked at this information and we had to figure out how many cups of raisins to serve 1 person so that we can figure out how to serve 32 people. And in turn, we know how much a pound of raisins is. And so we had to come back and figure out, well, how much could 1 cup of raisins cost? It was a really big problem. So what I found is that the students, they no longer walk into my room to just experience and just take on learning. We come in and we really challenge it. And I've told them, and I talked to the students about this, because of Common Core, really encouraging us to not have the students just use the rules, but to teach them how to use them. We're applying the math every day. And with my standard math students, nobody's coming in and we're not just doing math. We are coming in and we're using it every single day. Is it hard? Yeah, it's pretty hard. Is it challenging? It's pretty challenging. But you know what? They're willing to do it. They're really willing to try it. So Common Core is really asking them to do these things. In the classroom, a Common Core classroom looks like this. When students come in, you're going to see students that are asking better questions. You're going to see students that are asking and making better connections. And there's a much better collaboration going on. And Common Core is going to change the way the students are learning, and it's an exciting time. The math committee right now has to look at curriculum, though. We have to look at different things. Right now, Everyday Math is asking for mastery of the math facts by 4th grade, but Common Core is saying that we need to have it mastered by 3rd grade. So that's a pretty big deal, because right now our district is using Everyday Math. So we're, as a math committee, are going to look at the different curriculums that are available to us right now, including the one that I'm using right now. But I'm excited to not be just teaching math facts, but to really help our kids do this math journey. And that's what Common Core is asking all our teachers to do. And we're getting ready for tests that'll show that. So thank you.
Nice job, Sean. I love reports that show off our teachers, isn't it? Don't you get a sense of being in the classroom? For mathematics and English language arts, these are the 2 areas of the Common Core that have already been developed. So Carolyn has been working tirelessly leading teachers in some of these initiatives as well, including language arts. Here's Carolyn Crummas.
Good evening. I want to tell you a little bit about the Common Core with what is called English Language Arts, and sometimes it's referred to as the ELA. It does have 4 strands to it, which is reading, writing, listening and speaking, and language. The first one you'll notice up there is careful examination of text, and what we see in the Common Core is there's an increase, or what they call a staircase, of text complexity, in which they want students to be able to read that would meet the demands of college or even career reading levels. So in order to have that, an emphasis is done on careful examination of text, which means that 80 or 90% of what students are reading in the classroom, their tasks and the questions related to it should really be more text dependent. And because what Common Core is also asking us to do is to increase our what we call informational text or nonfiction text, that there should be more scrutiny in the classroom on text and also references to textual evidence. And we'll be seeing more and more of that in the classroom. And actually in our classrooms today, we are seeing more and more of that because of being a little more ready for the Common Core than I think some of the other districts are. The next thing is exemplar text, which is something new. The Common Core does not require that you read certain types of text. They do require that you read certain types of text, for example, like Shakespeare or classic myths or historical documents, but they don't give you required readings so that we are able to make that choice of what we will be able to use in the classroom. It does provide what they call exemplar text, which they're talking about out there. And what it is, it's a list of books that are matched to grade levels, that are literature-based or they're informational texts. And the nice thing about it is that we have this list is that we're able to integrate these types of texts into our social studies or our science curriculum, which really, once again, causes that collaborative learning across the disciplines. Our 4th one is research. It's often called the 4th R. And what's great about the research is that it's really being promoted across all of the literary areas. It's interesting that even starting in kindergarten, our students are doing some research by comparing 2 texts on a common topic to show comparisons and contractions of the 2 texts. And of course, even though that's pretty rigorous for a kindergartner, it is done with some prompting or scaffolding by the classroom teacher. In writing, Common Core addresses 3 writing forms. The first one is narrative, and then we have information, explanatory text, and the new one, or the biggest takeaway with Common Core, is called argument writing. And it starts actually even in kindergarten with what we call opinion writing. And really, opinion writing is really just a basic form of argument writing. And it moves up until 6th grade, where they actually start to learn how to do argument writing, and in developing sound reasoning, making claims, and writing and showing the evidence of what their claims are. The speaking and listening component of Common Core's, actually, we're quite excited about this, but because of our oral language initiative, which we started several years ago, and using our 21st century framework, which is a big initiative in our district as well, many of these Common Core standards we are already meeting. And we're finding that our students are already doing what we would consider sophisticated communication for their age, along with integrating a lot of technology into their presentations. The grammar really is what they're calling the language strand. And it has to do with vocabulary and conventions, and they are treated separately. The reason why is because it really does cover all of the core curriculum areas. Grammar, however, is actually meant to be mastered by 8th grade. And the reason for this also is because of this text complexity that they're talking about. It continually increases, like we said the staircase, but because the text is complicated, we know that the grammar and the vocabulary also has to be increased, and so we're working towards both of those. What I'd like to do now is introduce you to one of our teacher leaders, Mary Courtney, who is an 8th grade language arts teacher, to tell you a little bit more about what's going on in our classrooms.
Thank you. I'm kind of short. I'll move this down. Probably the most exciting aspect of adopting Common Core is that we really are already using many of these techniques and strategies in our classrooms. The updated guidelines just give us a chance to focus on some really great new initiatives, and they give us the chance to really bring into the classroom all of these great things that Carol Ann has told you about in new ways. All of us every day, you know, our goal is to get these kids ready, excuse me, for college and career, and that's what the Common Core standards are about. So in terms of reading, teachers are already guiding students along a staircase of these complex texts, getting more complex at each level, but the standards increase that rigor to a really much greater degree, and they put an increased emphasis on informational and explanatory text. And the reason this is important is because it will spur us, I think, to include more content that's relevant to the kinds of analytical thinking, reading, responding that these kids are going to need in their 21st century lives. A really exciting focus of the Common Core is this argument writing idea. It's the ability to compose logical arguments based on researched, substantive claims and sound reasoning and relevant evidence. And it will begin in the early grades as opinion writing, very early, I guess kindergarten, really. So the kids will begin to learn to put their opinions into this kind of form. It builds in 6th grade up to the actual argument writing phase, and it includes both those kinds of short focus projects that are so common in the workplace, important for them to know, and longer in-depth research type pieces that are so important for higher level academic work. We believe that this is going to give students the opportunity to master the writing tools that will allow them to concisely and persuasively present their findings on and analysis of any topic in any setting. That's the goal. Finally, the new standards underscore what District 67 leaders already understand and have put into motion, which is the critical importance of technology integration in the language arts curriculum. The standards require that students be taught skills related to the production, use, and analysis of digital media. Our one-to-one netbook initiative, our summer tech camps for teachers, our professional development that we continue to do across the curriculum, these are all at the heart of both our own 21st century learning goals and the Common Core goals. So we feel very confident that our LA educators are ready for a smooth integration of the Common Core into their everyday practice. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Whoops, I got to put this back up here. Just as our last highlight with our English language arts, probably one of the most key advances that we're seeing here in our Common Core is the literacy standards for social studies, science, and history. And the reason for this is because it really does emphasize the importance of all children learning to read and write, and then taking that and applying that to their core subjects, along with developing all the skills in all of their classes, not just in language arts. And to see this integration is really important to us because it really does a shift in what the responsibilities are for our classroom teachers in all of our core areas. I do want you to know that the K-5 standards for social studies and science are embedded in the LA and math standard, or the core standards. And the National Council for Social Studies and the Next Generation Science Framework are the standards that are really the mainstay for the 6th to 12th grade students, because the Common Core standards for science and social studies have not been completed yet. They're supposed to be done in the fall. But they will parallel each other. So there are just a few of our highlights from Common Cores, but I'd also like to introduce you to two other teacher leaders. Linda Biani is a third grade teacher at Cherokee School, and she's going to be talking about social studies. And Julie Meadows is a sixth grade teacher at DPM, and she's going to be talking about science.
Good evening. I'm Linda Biondi, and I represent the elementary level to discuss a little bit about social studies and Common Core. Social studies instruction in the elementary level and the middle school setting is definitely going to be enhanced in many ways through the implementation of Common Core. It provides teachers with basically a roadmap, letting them know with clear and concise information what the children really do need to learn, and to help them in the real world, in college, and in the working setting as well. Now, there are 10 themes that the NCSS has created for social studies. I'm not going to go through all 10, but I do have it as a handout if anyone's interested in taking a look at them. These are overarching big ideas, and they give teachers of social studies a clear idea of the concepts that the kids must learn, starting in the primary grades through vocabulary, activities, and different concepts. They're introduced in an age-appropriate way through the use of informational text, which, believe it or not, young children absolutely adore. They love nonfiction. And through the years, it's been difficult to find good pieces of nonfiction to really help kids with some of these social studies concepts. So we'll be using a lot of that. We will be doing short and long-term research, which really, as elementary teachers, we do. We do an awful lot of this correlation between the different areas of the curriculum. We're going to be using the language, art, and math core concepts, as Carolyn said, and adhering to these 10 overarching big ideas. The goal of an integrated study of social sciences is to promote civic competence. And the primary purpose of social studies is to help young people develop the ability to make informed and reasoned decisions for the public good as citizens. And hopefully to learn more about a culturally diverse, which we struggle with a little bit here locally, but this will hopefully bring it more to the forefront for them, culturally diverse situations to help them work in a democratic society in what is now an interdependent world. And interestingly, this goal does not differ that much from what Thomas Jefferson dreamed for education in the United States. Today's Common Core standards, however, allow that goal to be met using technology, intellectual reasoning through that argument writing and debate, and collaboration with others in the classroom, in the community, in the United States, and in the larger global community through a variety of 21st century tools. It's an exciting time to be teaching little ones, and social studies, I really firmly believe, has limitless possibilities through the Common Core. So it's exciting. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Julie Meadows, and I teach sixth grade science at the middle school. Science rocks. That's how I started in the fall. That's our catchphrase in science our first day of school. And we have this big bulletin board that even says that, and it's got big stones on it. But as we went through and the kids were learning and they're figuring out some really tough problems, or they found that their data matched what they originally thought, their catchphrase is science rocks. So yesterday we were going through we're in animal classification, and one little girl suddenly stood up and she goes, "I get it. Science rocks. You don't mean a stone." And I'm like, yes, that's right. And I looked at her and I said, yes, science truly does rock. I think that science educators, we have a little bit of a leg up, an inside track, because we've been teaching so many so many concepts in the same way that now this new initiative is asking all teachers to teach. The science department, however, is currently looking at their K-8 science curriculum based on the STEM initiative and the new Common Core standards for this K-8 science that will soon be finished. The STEM initiative is the integrated approach of teaching science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And this approach will enable our students to become more independent, innovative learners, and become better problem solvers. The Common Core standards for science will place greater emphasis on integrating science and math, as well as expecting much more from student writing and reflection. Emphasis is also placed on what expert scientists do in real practice. Like the standards in other subjects, the science standards are designed to prepare students for college and for future careers. Science standards are embedded in the English Language Arts Common Core. For example, students will be taught how to make claims and organize evidence in their scientific investigations. And a lot of that is going on right now even. Science, math, reading, and writing will be closely integrated. Students will read and comprehend science or technical text with greater proficiency and independence. Instead of reliance on science textbooks, student reading will come from more original scientific sources. Using constructed response questions, science teachers will present students with novel problems and situations in the context of one or more rich essential questions. These questions will guide students to not only solve the problems and assess situations, but also to provide clear analytical explanations for their answers and the processes they use to arrive at them. Our K-8 science teachers have already begun our curricular revision. Led by the consultant, Dr. Anne Rochelle, we are currently conducting a gap analysis of our curriculum to see what revisions are needed. We are also learning new teaching strategies to provide students with necessary 21st century skills, such as greater analysis and evaluation. Our staff is dedicated to finding, implementing, and assessing new concepts that will allow our students to continue on the path towards college and career readiness. Science rocks. Thank you.
It is fun to hear from the experts, and they're pretty ramped up about this. You know, one of the reasons we're so excited is that Illinois State Standards set such a low bar for our students, such a low bar. 96, 98, 99% of our students always met the standards, and what could we do with that? So here we go. This is how we're going to assess the Common Core. Partnership for Assessment of College and Career Readiness, the PARC. You'll hear that a lot in the future. They're basically, the federal government has funded 2 different assessments to be created. The Smarter Balance comes out of Oregon. It's actually NWA is helping create that. Illinois has chosen the PARC, and that's out of a consortium of states you see in the dark here on the map, and out of New York. Things may change, of course, but we're expecting the implementation of the PARC assessment to be in the fall of 2014, and that will replace the ISAT. So it's not been developed yet. They're developing it, so I'm not going to swear to any of this. But we have so many resources to help guide us, and that's one of the wonderful things about the Common Core. Instead of Illinois creating it on its own, and then all the publishers deciding, you know, Illinois decides district by district what they buy, let's build our curriculum materials for Texas, or let's build for California, who do statewide adoptions of materials. So we end up with materials that are a little bit more geared for Texas and the other states that do statewide adoptions. That's no longer going to be true. The curriculum materials are going to be designed for all of us. Just listed a few of the resources here. This has been coming at us for about a year and a half, 2 years, and there's some wonderful resources. All the educational gurus and the consortiums are working on this. And here's just one example. The National PTA, our APT, is supported here. The National PTA has created brochures for parents for each grade level to help parents understand what the expectations for learning are. These are the language arts expectations. third grade. These are the math expectations. We'll be able to use these materials instead of creating our own. One of the reasons we're very excited. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up now. We have an implementation plan that we've, of course, already begun this year. It rolls out into 2014-15 when we find our first assessment of the National Common Core. And Carolyn's going to share just a few things of what we've been doing. Just a few things.
We do have a plan. As you can see, I believe that all of the board members have a copy of this in front of them, and it is a four-phase plan going from just general awareness to full implementation. I think I'm just going to point out a few key points. And obviously this year it has a lot to do with awareness and going from the Board of Education to our teachers to our APT so that everyone is aware of this huge initiative. We do have consultants already working with us. As we mentioned, Janet Heigl is working with mathematics and Anne Rochelle with our science curriculum. And we are working already on developing professional development for our teachers. We're looking at an argument workshop to teach argument writing to our 6-8 teachers. Although they are using it already, we really just want to refine that and make everybody secure because, again, it's across the curriculum. It's not just in LA. And we're also looking, because of the increase on informational texts, having a workshop for our teachers on informational text best practices and strategies to be used in the classroom. Our main, if you look in phase 2, our main purpose is looking closely at that content, what to cut, what to keep, what to create. And a lot of what we already have, we are doing a lot of great things in our district already that are fulfilling the standards of Common Core. And there are some things that we do have to make some shift in, and that's the time of which you're looking at it. Again, we're already doing some of this year. And then we move on. Our main objective in phase 3 has to do with having our curriculum and our assessments in place, and also starting to look at our report cards for those revisions to match the Common Core. And full implementation in the year 14-15, when we'll be taking the PARCC assessment. And of course, one thing that we do great in this district is looking at our data and using that to drive our instructions, and that's exactly what we'll do after the PARCC assessment, is looking at what do we need, what revisions do we need, what kinds of supports and interventions do we need to do with our children. So a very quick overview, but we do have a plan in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, well,
actually, I have a question. So when these tests start, they will replace ISAT, and what will happen with our MAP testing?
Well, it's a good question. Julie Cooley and I have been discussing this, and as I said, the Smarter Balance assessment, which is the other national assessment, is being created in part by NWA. Who knows? You know, we've chosen PARCC at this time. We expect PARCC will replace both ISAT and NWA at some point, because NWA will have probably reconfigured their assessment. Although probably in 2014 and maybe even into 2015-16, we might recommend to keep NWA, to keep that longitudinal data and correlate that with the PARCC. So decisions to make ahead of time.
But in theory, it would be nice if students would be spending less time taking standardized tests.
Absolutely.
Right.
And better tests, right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Andy, thank you. And I also want to say thank you to Sean, Mary, Linda, Julie. Really good job. You can catch the excitement of what's going on inside our classrooms. It's a wonderful day in our classrooms every single day here in Lake Forest. So congratulations, Andy and Carolyn, too. Thank you. That concludes the curriculum report for tonight.
And that brings us to the Independent Counsel Ronald Safer report regarding Deer Path Middle School matter. I would like to turn the meeting over to John Julian.
Thank you, Julia. Good evening. In November of last year, information came to light regarding conduct during 2008 of then Deer Path Middle School Principal John Steinert. While in early 2009, Dr. Griffith and the board were made aware of the general nature of Mr. Steinert's conduct and imposed what they perceived to be appropriate sanctions, the recent information disclosed behavior by Mr. Steinert, which both the administration and the board claimed was unknown to them. In the wake of the new revelations, the board accepted Mr. Steinert's resignation. Following Mr. Steinert's resignation, questions were raised about the handling in 2009 of the matter by the administration and the board. In November of last year, this board formed a subcommittee to conduct an investigation of the handling of the John Steinert matter. The subcommittee comprises board members who were not on the board during the time in question. This subcommittee, of which I am the chair, selected Ron Safer, a well-respected and experienced investigator and an attorney with the firm of Schiff Harden, to conduct an independent review of the handling of the matter by the administration and the board. Mr. Safer was charged with 3 directives. 1, determine whether the administration and the board had followed policies in place at the time. 2, determine, in light of the circumstances, whether the district's policies should be revised. 3, determine whether any wrongdoing by the board or administration had been committed in the handling of the matter. Mr. Safer has completed his investigation and is here tonight, along with his associate, Mr. Jamal Muhammad, to present his findings to the public. A copy of the report received by the board will be available for anyone who's interested. I believe they'll be made available at the end of the meeting, or actually at the end of this segment, at a table in the back. And if Ann Whipple out there, is that correct? All right, there's Ann. And yes, the reports will be made available in the back of the room on a table at the end of Mr. Safer's presentation. Following his presentation, Mr. Safer has agreed to take questions from the public. If you would like to ask Mr. Safer any questions, please come up to the microphone, the podium, state your name and address for the record. I also ask that in order to allow all interested parties a chance to speak, you limit your questions to 2 for each appearance at the microphone. If you have more than 2 questions, you may return to the microphone after others have had a chance to speak. With that being said, Ron Safer, if you would present your findings.
Thank you. In conducting our investigation, we spoke with 16 different individuals, including all current and former board members, district administrators, the board's outside counsel, law enforcement personnel, the former assistant state's attorney assigned to Mr. Steinert's case, as well as others. We analyzed documents including the redacted and unredacted police file, the prosecutor's file in this matter, the court file, Mr. Steinert's employee file, Superintendent Griffith's file, emails, daily logs, board minutes, policy manuals, laws, letters, and other communications from members of this community. The answer to 2 of these questions with which we were charged was simple. The first, whether the district's policies and procedures were followed, was that there are no policies and procedures that address this type of situation. Mr. Steinert's misconduct took place outside of the workplace and was at most tangentially related to his job and this school district. And no policy and procedure directed the board or the superintendent about its reaction to a criminal investigation involving conduct of a district employee outside of the scope of that employment. The answer to the second question was equally easy. Yes, their experience teaches us that there ought to be such a policy, and we have provided a suggestion as to what that policy might be. The third question involves a little more explanation, and it is whether there was any wrongdoing committed by the board or the administration. We had a number of conclusions regarding the investigation and factors related to this question. The first conclusion is that the investigation of Steinert's actions was not thorough. In the absence of a policy or procedure to govern his action, the superintendent did not conduct a thorough investigation of this misconduct, nor did the board direct him to do so. The board's in-depth consideration of this matter, for reasons that I'll discuss in a moment, took place only days after this conduct came to light. The information available to the board came largely from Steinert himself. He had an interview, gave an interview that was conducted by then Deputy Superintendent Cyrus, and assistant superintendent in charge of human resources believed that Mr. Steinert was truthful and complete. On the surface, that conclusion makes a lot of sense. Mr. Steinert was not denying the offense. Indeed, he was admitting his conduct. He expressed remorse for his conduct and seemed to appreciate the gravity of it. The conclusion that Mr. Steinert was truthful and complete, however, was without objective evidence to support it. The investigation of Mr. Steinert's misconduct consisted of little more than the interview of Mr. Steinert and a failed attempt to obtain the police reports in this matter. There was an investigation that more closely tracked the mission of the board, and that is, was there any sign of misconduct in the school setting with regard to district employees or anybody related to the district? And that investigation found that his misconduct did not bleed into the school environment. There were a number of avenues that would have revealed more information about Steinert's misconduct. There is a public filing, in this case, an information that contained the formal charge. There are in-court proceedings, which of course are open to the public. After the guilty plea was entered in May, many months after this came to light and after conclusions were reached, the unredacted police report could have been obtained and the prosecutor would have shared their file. The fact is that once the initial personnel decision was made about Steinert and his evaluation completed, essentially no additional evaluation was conducted. With that background, the question of whether there was misconduct or wrongful conduct involves a question of intent. Two questions are central to that inquiry. First, did district personnel, other than Steinert, have information about this matter that was concealed? Second, did district personnel intentionally fail to uncover any information? We answer both of those questions no. The evaluation. So the timing of this is important. This incident came to light on January 23rd when Superintendent Steinert Superintendent Griffith was served with a search warrant for Mr. Steinert's phone. Only a week and a day or two later, written evaluations that were mandated by law to be performed by February 1st were due. The focus of the inquiry, therefore, both from the superintendent and the board, was what would that evaluation be, and what were they going to do about Mr. Steinert? Because the administration, faced a paradox. You had someone who the administration believed, and there's no reason to believe that they were wrong in any way, was an outstanding principal in his core job function. On the other hand, he had committed offensive and potentially, at that time, only potentially, unlawful conduct on his personal time. The misconduct, however, was outside of the work environment, did not involve minors, and was, at least as far as they knew, relatively isolated. In light of that paradox and those facts, the question the superintendent framed and the one the board considered was whether Steinert should be retained, not, that is, his contract renewed when it expired in June, not whether he should be dismissed immediately. And that certainly was reasonable given the facts that were known. The conclusion was that Steinert would be notified by February 1st, again mandated, that his evaluation resulted in that his contract would not be renewed because of his misconduct. Again, the focus of the inquiry, and outside counsel was consulted about this, but it was labor counsel, because the focus of the inquiry was whether there were sufficient grounds to take this action given that the misconduct was unrelated to the district and the school. The board, the superintendent recommended, and the board concluded that it was, and that was the action that Mr. Steinert was informed of on February 1st. Later, in March, there was reconsideration of that, and I'll discuss that in a moment. Nothing happens in a vacuum. It is important to analyze these issues in two ways. One, in context, and two, as best as possible, without the looking through the prism of hindsight. When placed in context, it is important to note that the administration and the board at that time were addressing a myriad issues raised by a materially reduced budget. Those financial considerations and how to deal with it were paramount to the board and the superintendent. 2 weeks after the evaluation of Mr. Steinert was completed, the superintendent received news that he might have cancer. The news and subsequent developments required his time, attention, and energy. In either February or March of 2009, and it is not clear which, nor is it particularly material, the superintendent recommended that the board reconsider its decision and retain Steinert. He believed, as I discussed earlier, that Steinert had been truthful in his interviews, understood the seriousness of his conduct, and was remorseful. In conjunction with outside counsel, he crafted a letter that set forth restrictive conditions for Steinert's retention and his tenure, and also asked for and received from Steinert a resignation letter that would be put into effect if any of those conditions were violated. The board accepted this recommendation. No one sought or obtained additional information before or after this reconsideration. The superintendent and the board mistakenly believed they had sufficient and adequate information concerning this misconduct. The superintendent and board mistakenly believed that Steinert had been complete and truthful. Neither the board nor the superintendent had experience with the criminal justice system. Fortunately, the district has not had this situation rise before it. They had no knowledge or experience to guide them regarding the information available to them. And although the superintendent consulted a lawyer, and some board members at the time, in fact, were lawyers, they were not criminal lawyers. The limited criminal justice experience affected the district's ability to both identify the type of information that was available and obtain that information. We conclude that this lack of knowledge and experience led to the limited investigation. We find there was neither concealment of information nor intentional ignorance of the fact. We find that the superintendent's recommendation and the board's response was well within the range of reasonable responses to the facts that they found.
Is that your report, Ron?
It is.
Okay, thank you very much. As I indicated, Ron is available to take questions from the public. And if anyone would like to take questions, I ask you to go to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Please limit any questions you have upon your first approach to the podium, 2 questions, and then step back to see if anyone else would have any.
Sure.
So thank you very much.
Thanks. My name is Gary Finley, 1733 West Everett Road. I would like to know if in the investigation, was there anything keeping the board from revealing that information to the public about what had happened? Was there anything in the contracts that kept them from saying anything about this to the public in general?
Not something that we investigated.
Right, there were no policies at all, is what you said. And I was wondering.
There are no policies that govern how the board was to address criminal conduct that of a district employee that was unrelated to the district.
Right, but there might have been something maybe in a, I don't know if even a union contract was applying here, but there might have been something in a contract that would have kept them from coming forward if they didn't have proof of a criminal activity. But you're saying that, as far as you know, there was nothing like that.
Yeah.
There was nothing keeping them from coming public.
If there was, certainly at the time of the information, at the time the information was filed, which was January 26th, that's public information.
Okay. And then I don't really have a question. I just have a little bit of a comment. You spent a little bit of time apologizing for the behavior that occurred on the board and on behalf of the superintendent, and frankly, it just took away a little bit of the credibility of the report that otherwise sounded very sound.
Well, I'm
generally satisfied. It's just
I appreciate that. I apologize for.
Stop apologizing.
I apologize for nobody's behavior. I was trying to relate what our recommendations were and trying to put that in context, which I did not intend as an apology.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Debbie Dent from West Old Elm in Lake Forest. Once we have an opportunity to read the report, does the report have all the information in it that you gathered? Is there anything
I'm
left
sorry.
out? Anything significant left out of the written report? Any significant fact?
I don't think so.
Once Once we have had an opportunity to read that, will you be available for further questions?
I mean, I think I've summarized what the report said to you this evening. So there's not going to be anything new or startling that you'll hear.
Let me just tell you, I haven't read the report, and I believe in reading the facts before I make a judgment. But I graduated from Stanford University and Georgetown Law Center. I have practiced law for many, many years. I think it is outrageous that anybody could come to a conclusion that this was anything other than gross negligence on the behalf of our highly paid superintendent. And I would like you, once I've had an opportunity to look at the facts, I would like you to defend that accusation. That I just find it startling. And it seems to me that, I just do not know. Can you tell me what was known about the penis and the email? Give us details of what was known at the time.
Okay. And, I appreciate that opinions will differ. Part of the reason that you have somebody conduct an investigation is to try to learn all the facts and conclude. As you know, I didn't graduate from as fine an institution as Stanford, but we share law schools. So
one out of two isn't bad.
Yeah, my Wharton professors might differ about Stanford, but as you know from your training and in general, lots of things seem outrageous. And the reason that you get someone to look into it is to sort of dig through what happened, what people knew when, and judge as best they can why things were known and unknown. And that's what we did. In answer to your direct question of what was known, at the time, the superintendent, neither the superintendent nor the board knew anything about any photograph that was texted. Mr. Steiner expressly denied that he had sent any explicit pictures in his interview, and he was asked that question. He did say that he had sent emails that were aggressive, assertive, explicit, and the superintendent did relay exactly those things to the board.
Exactly the words he said, like, would you like to, whatever it was, my penis?
No. He said, Mr. Steiner did not relay the precise, what he said was, these were explicit emails. So he characterized them.
Sexually explicit?
He didn't say. He characterized them as explicit.
This is sounding like I did not have sex with that woman. This is sounding like such a cover-up.
Ma'am, we appreciate, if you'd hold just one moment. Is there anyone else who has any other questions? If you'd step down, if you can pose your next question in a form of a question, feel free to come back up after we've had some other opportunity for people to speak. Thank you.
I'm Nancy Thorner from 331 East Blossom Avenue in Lake Bluff. This is a little bit different kind of question. I was just wondering how you were chosen, and if you're chosen by the same agency out of Highland Park that also searches to fill teacher and superintendent positions here in Lake Forest, one and the same. I was wondering how you were chosen, if you were chosen by the same agency out of Highland Park that likewise searches for the teachers and the superintendent's positions to be filled here in Lake Forest School District.
Yeah, I was chosen by the subcommittee of of the board members who were not sitting at the time.
Okay, then it might be, maybe I can't ask another question, how the board members then, where they want to find you as a lawyer, whether they went to the search place in Highland Park that everybody seems to use in this area to find people that they want to serve as physicians and teachers or other things too for the district. It's a great big agency of Highland Park.
Yeah, I doubt it.
I'm on that. I was on the subcommittee, and the answer is no.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions from the audience?
Hi, Amy Messner, 1308 Edgewood Road. And I had a couple questions. You said that there wasn't a policy in place, correct? But isn't there a sexual harassment policy in place that says that covers minors, teachers, community members?
No, there is a sexual harassment policy in place in the context of the school environment.
Okay, and this woman was in the school environment. I know she was an intern with the police department. However, her job at that time meant that she rotated through the school and was under the care of Officer Solkin, who is a school employee, correct?
Yeah, the
No, Officer
harassment.
Solkin is not a school employee.
Okay, but he has a role within the school.
Yes, and I don't mean to jump on in, Ron. The conduct that took place well after she had left the school. Many, many months after she had left the school. The texting took place after she was gone from the school, so it was nowhere near the school environment.
Okay, but he was using, Mr. Steinert was using a school cell phone, right?
That's true.
So it's school property.
Yeah, the outside counsel who addresses labor issues was consulted on exactly that issue contemporaneously and found that the policy regarding harassment did not apply to this situation because it was outside of the school environment. It was initially during the summer. She had left the school system. It was unrelated.
Okay, so just hypothetically, as a mom who volunteers at the school, if I get a text from a principal or teacher or staff member and it's in the summertime, that's okay?
No, none of
And he
this
does
is
it, he or
none of
she
this is
doesn't?
okay. Nobody
Right.
nobody has said that any of this is okay.
Right, because I know you were talking about intent. Can you cover that one more time for me? Because I don't have the report in front of me, but you had mentioned something about intent on behalf of either Superintendent Griffith or the board members at that time.
Right. So the question really that is framed when you think of was there wrongful conduct is not whether a criminal investigation could have been done better, but rather whether there was some kind of an intent either to conceal facts or to remain willfully ignorant of it.
Okay.
And that is what we concluded.
Okay. And I
there
think
was none.
perhaps
Amy?
it might be Debbie's
You know what,
point.
Amy, I'm sorry. Pardon me, just in the interest of time, if there are other people...
I know, John, I'm sorry.
No, that-
We've been
that's quite all
waiting
right,
since
because
December for this, and these are my tax dollars at
I
work. So I
understand,
just
and
have
you
one
will-
more question, if you might
Okay.
entertain me. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay.
I guess what I'm wondering, and maybe this is to Debbie's point, Debbie Dent's point, is if Superintendent Griffith escorted 2 police officers onto school property who had both these police officers had a warrant for school property, and John Steinert signed off on those texts at the time, I believe. Is that correct? He signed off on the texts and pled guilty, or was arrested at that time?
He was arrested, ultimately pled guilty.
So to me, that kind of communicates willful intent, or as Ms. Dent stated, perhaps gross negligence of not doing anything about what happened.
Yeah, I think and I appreciate what you're saying. I think you're conflating 2 different things, though. Certainly, the board The intent of Mr. Steinert was present from the beginning. And that's not the intent that we were addressing. So that's been established. He did in May plead guilty to that, and so his intent is unquestioned. The question becomes, was the board intentionally ignorant of the full scope of Mr. Steinert's conduct, or did they either intentionally ignorant, or did they become aware of some of that and conceal it? That's the intent that we were examining.
Right, I guess that's what I'm wondering, if Superintendent Griffith walked onto school property with 2 police officers who had a warrant.
See,
Amy?
but you were
Their
still,
willful
I mean,
intent.
you're...
I'm going to have to cut, because this could go on. A dialogue can be had with Mr. Safer after the meeting, and you certainly, if you can pose another question, come back, but I know there are a number of other people who need to ask questions.
Okay,
so
I'll
you
come
can certainly
back.
come back, all
Okay.
right? Other questions, please. Step up to the podium, and I would suggest you make your way over there. Yes, ma'am.
Beth Laufenberg, 435 East Deer Path. I have a question about the, similar to Amy Messner, about that the incident was tangentially related to the job. And I'm curious how we can consider that tangentially related when it did take place on district property. Was the phone the district's? Wasn't that given to Mr. Steiner by the district?
Sure.
And when the police came to have a warrant for that phone, the district knew that this activity or behavior took place on that district property, correct?
I would assume, yes.
Assuming, okay. Is there anything in your investigation that showed that that phone was taken, reviewed, any action taken by the superintendent or the board with regard to the phone?
Yes, when the phone was returned to the district, it did not have messages on it. I mean, but saying that the phone was school property and thus it is related to school is like saying that a check fraud scheme is related to the school because it was used by a pen taken from the school. I mean, it's not related in any real sense.
I would disagree with that, but as to tangentially related, if we're not going to talk about the cell phone being given to him by the district, I do find, in my own opinion, and I'm curious to know yours, the fact that he met this person through his work, I find that to be part of the school environment. He did not meet her other places. He met her through his job in a school environment. He used the property the school gave him for this behavior, and I would think that that would have been investigated by the board or the superintendent. But because I don't know what you've discovered, I don't know what you found relating to that. So I'm curious if there was any information that you uncovered regarding what was looked into with the phone, how this relationship began. Is it your conclusion then that those have nothing to do with the school environment?
Yeah, they met in the school environment. The phone messages were sent months or a fairly extended period after that meeting had taken place. The meeting at the school was an isolated incident, and I think fairly characterized as coincidental.
My last question would be, then there was no investigation of the cell phone after that was returned and they found that there was nothing on it? There was no further investigation into what may have been deleted?
I mean, I assume that the police, that...
No, I don't mean by the police. I mean by the board and the superintendent.
Yeah.
No, nothing further after that. It was returned and it was empty.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? And as Ron is giving answers, please listen to determine if he's already asked a part of a question you have, and also try and limit these to questions rather than dialogues. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Hi, Steve Thornberry, 656 Highview Terrace. I guess I fast forward in my mind to sometime after May when he pleaded guilty. And that's when I can't imagine in future performance reviews that the question wouldn't be asked and documented. So, hey, whatever happened with your arrest? Were, guilty, not guilty? And, to me, that's a breakdown, and I wonder if there was ever any documentation evaluated at that juncture.
Oh, I think the board the superintendent was aware that Steiner had pled guilty, and indeed was aware of the conditions of his probation. He was sentenced to probation in certain conditions, and was informed when he had satisfied, or that he had satisfied those conditions. So you're right. I mean, that fact was available, and people were aware of that.
Yes, sir.
Gary Pete, 515 Valley Road here in Lake Forest. The tenor of your discussion so far is that the board quickly realized the gravity of the situation when 2 policemen showed up and arrested Mr. Steinert on school grounds?
That was when he was not arrested on school grounds, and the search warrant the phone was taken from him on school grounds.
But the school board, within a short period of time after that,
was
accepted the
informed
gravity
of
of
that.
the situation.
Yes.
They then proceeded to make a decision based on an interview with the accused and the denial of a police report.
That he would not be retained.
Okay. Was there any attempt made to get legal counsel in a criminal matter to get further information as to how they could pursue? Was there any attempt made to conduct contact with the local police to see if they might get additional information from the police of the jurisdiction where the complaint was filed?
Right. So no counsel with criminal background was consulted. The police department the police report, a FOIA was issued for the police report. They got a severely redacted police report. There was no further attempt to get a police report after that time.
Okay. Was there any contact that you're aware of between the board members and council, or was all of this filtered through the superintendent?
Board members and council.
I believe you indicated there was labor council that
yeah, I don't know whether the Labor Council appeared before the board, but his email was presented to the board, thus, at least indirectly, his input was received by the board.
But again, no attempt of any of the board members to contact council for any additional information.
For criminal counsel, that's right.
Very good. Thank you.
Michael Freeman, Harlan Lane, Lake Forest. What was the opinion of Labor Council? Was this a terminable offense?
His opinion really was that he could not, should not, I'm not sure which, be suspended at that time, and that it was an offense for which you could choose to not retain him. That was really the focus of the question framed by counsel and answered by counsel.
So getting directly to the point then, the February 1st deadline that you mentioned, which was the explanation for why a more thorough investigation wasn't done, at least by February 1st, the board was advised that they could not renew his contract based on the evidence presented by February 1st.
Yes, and let me say that that is not an explanation for why a more thorough investigation wasn't done.
No, you're right, they're separate, but I just want to make sure that we're clear that by February 1st at least, Labor Council said that was an option available to the school board.
Not only available to, but what the school board decided to do.
Okay, that they could not, they could choose not to renew. All right, now, the other thing you said about the February 1st deadline, though, was that That might have explained why there was only a redacted police report or a less thorough investigation, because the board had to act, or the superintendent had to act by February 1st to give notice?
Again, I think you're putting two facts together that I would not put together. The evaluation did have to be completed by law by February 1st. At that time, the district did not have, nor could it get, an unredacted police report. Okay. That doesn't explain why none was ever obtained, nor why further investigation wasn't done.
Right, but unlike the police that needed a subpoena, they could have requested from the phone provider all of the text messages.
No.
Why couldn't they?
It
was their phone, it was the district's phone.
No. No, the phone provider does not retain text messages.
I can tell you for a fact they do, because I've gotten them myself in investigations. So
I was an assistant U.S. attorney for a decade. Absent a grand jury subpoena, you could not.
You can't get your own phone records.
You can get your own phone records, which will show a connection. It will not show the content of those communications.
So you can get them by subpoena, though, and they could have...
Not the content.
Okay. Who was the provider?
I don't know.
Okay. Well,
sir?
just one last question.
Please.
Even if, we're in agreement, though, I think, that even if they couldn't have gotten the complete police report by February 1st, in subsequent contract renewals, promotions, increases in salary, they certainly could have gotten the full police report.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Doug Morrow, 1806 Bowling Green Drive. You mentioned in your report that there were no applicable procedures in place that regarded this, that it specifically applied to this situation. You also stated that there, in your opinion, there should be procedures. Obviously, something went wrong somewhere. The actions taken were incorrect, but without malicious intent. Where did things go wrong, and what should have happened, and when should those things have happened? What could we have expected with best practices? And the second part of that is, how are we going to implement these so that it doesn't happen in the future?
I think both of those are very good questions. Where did things go wrong is tough, again, in hindsight. There was no experience here. In Chicago, this issue is dealt with. You are, in a sense, blessed that that criminal conduct for an employee that unrelated to the school had not come up before, and thus it was not a situation. We believe that there ought to be a policy, and have proposed it, it's included in the report, that says that once the board becomes aware that a district employee is the subject of an investigation by law enforcement authorities or has been charged with a criminal offense, regardless of whether the conduct was within the scope of the employee's employment, an experienced investigator should be appointed to gather and review all relevant available information. And that's something that we believe that's a policy that ought to be adopted. Where did things go wrong? It was, to some extent, an unfortunate confluence of, or fortunate, again, confluence of events, that you've got an excellent performer on the one hand in the context of his job, and somebody who has done something reprehensible in his private life. What do you do? A difficult question with no guidance.
So, please define an experienced investigator. Who should be chosen in a case like this?
Well, it should be somebody with some contact with the criminal justice system. So if you took a survey of the lawyers in my law firm, I'm not sure you would get a majority of lawyers who would say, that the charging document is publicly available. But if you asked anybody with any criminal background, 100% of them would know that. So anybody with any contact with the criminal justice system would be able to tell you, you can get the charging document. You can follow the proceedings in open court. After the investigation is over, you can go to the Lake County State's Attorney and say, I would like to, on behalf of the district, view the file. You could get an unredacted police report. With no contact with the criminal justice system, none of that is intuitive. But with contact with the criminal justice system, anybody who has any experience along those lines could guide the board.
Andrea Cutting, Tiverton Road. In your conclusions, you say that you conclude this lack of knowledge and experience led to the limited investigation. We find there was neither concealment of information nor intentional ignorance of the facts. So we get there was no intent, but is ignorance of the facts excusable? From a conduct standpoint, we're talking about misconduct, whether it's intentional or not, whether you break the law or you intended to break the law. Where's the line there?
Right. So, I mean, two different questions. If you're talking about from the point of the administration and the board, right? So that is the question is, and the entire discussion that we've had is, so why didn't they have all the information? And I think under the circumstances, in an ideal world, they certainly would have had it. Judged real time in context, I think it's understandable. Was that was that right? We certainly was not our charter to sit as some kind of a super board and second guess what decisions were made with the information that they had. Rather, it was to examine the context, what happened, and determine whether there was anything that was done that was wrongful. We determined there was not.
Ma'am, if you're directing us a question, we can't hear you when the tapes are replayed, and the audience on TV can't hear you. Yes, ma'am.
Lorraine Grieve, 1301 Knollwood Circle, Lake Forest. I applaud the initial direction given on the last page of this document for a future forward code of misconduct. My questions are probably more to the board at this point in time. I'm concerned, notably in the write-up here, how immediate an investigation would be in the future. One. Two, whether or not parents will be informed and the community will be informed if the board finds out that somebody has been criminally charged with something. Certainly there are certain offenses that I as a parent would want to know about immediately, if not sooner. And quite frankly, an employee put on leave if the offense is significant enough. And then my final point is just the question of when will the board fully define its policy going forward, because I'm assuming there may be some augmentation to what is in this packet tonight.
Well, let me try and answer that, and also just say in advance, questions to the board, if we can just direct the questions after these to Mr. Safer, and you can certainly address the board after the meeting on certain, if anyone else has questions to the board. However, to your first question, we don't know, we can't predict the future. If incidents happen which involve criminal conduct, there have to be judgments made that involved confidentiality, innocent until proven guilty. There's all sorts of considerations. So we can't flat out say, hey, no matter what happens, if there's a criminal act, you're going to know about it. I can't say that. We don't know. Depends on the circumstances. As to when we're going to address getting policies in place, I can tell you that there's a policy committee, that the recommendation following Mr. Safer's presentation is certainly to have the policy committee evaluate this matter and propose policies, if they think policies need to be revised or put in place, that will try and address the aspects of this which we feel can be improved upon. Now, Mr. Safer has recommended in his report 2 such policies, and those will certainly be taken into consideration. But that will have to undergo some review by the policy committee, and I can't tell you when that will eventually result in a policy, but it's going to happen sooner rather than later. So,
Okay, thank you.
okay, certainly. Yes, ma'am. Sir, is there? Sorry, I want to make sure everyone gets their chance here.
Bob Ely, 420 East Woodland. Did you see the search warrant?
Yes, I did see the search warrant.
So you read the search
I
warrant?
saw the application for the search warrant, which was in the state's attorney's file.
Okay. Do you know whether the labor lawyer saw the read the search warrant?
I'm sure he did not.
The superintendent got the search warrant, right? And
Yeah, the search warrant, by the way, is only a single sheet of paper that has no information about the support, that is, why the search warrant is issued.
okay, it just says, we have a right to get the phone.
Precisely.
If you were you were a AUSA, so if you got some question regarding labor law that was uncomfortable, would you field that yourself, or would you go and find a labor lawyer?
Right. I would go and find a labor lawyer.
So do you think that the labor lawyer should have said, this is out of my bailiwick, you need to get someone who knows what they're doing?
I think it would have been, again, I don't know what was going through his mind. I don't know exactly what he was asking. I think it would have been a very good thing if the labor lawyer had said, gee, this is a criminal matter. You ought to have somebody with knowledge of the criminal system look into this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Are you stepping up to? I'm sorry. The woman who's in. Have you had a chance yet? I'm sorry, I can't recall. I haven't. You have? Then please step up. I want to make sure everyone gets their.
Susan Franzetti, 755 Oak Knoll Drive. Good evening, Mr. Safer.
Good evening.
First of all, because I think there's maybe some concern in the room about this, did you recommend to the board that your report not be distributed until tonight?
I didn't recommend anything about the timing. I was not, I will say that I wasn't in the interim between when I made my findings and about tonight. I was not available to come out and explain the report, and I did think that it would be best if the report were issued at a time when questions could be answered.
Okay, so you did advise the board that it would be better not to distribute the report until you were here to answer questions?
Advise may be strong. That was my view, yes.
Okay, no, that's fine. Could you look at recommendation number 3 on page 6 of your report? It's wherever possible, key documents in sensitive issues should be provided to the board. Could you explain what the factual basis is for that recommendation?
Yes. So, there were documents. The board considers lots of information, as you know. Again, we're focused today on something that, if this room is the information that the board functions on, we heard fortunate enough to hear a long presentation on core curriculum, and that's much closer to what the board considers, but that in and of itself is a fraction of what they consider. What we're talking about is like this of what the board considers. So I am speaking towards this much of that. That's my frame of reference. But within that, the board received its information from the superintendent which is, a screen. I would think that it would be preferable, especially in a circumstance such as this, which is sensitive, which does have privacy considerations, which does have constitutional presumption of innocence, that you have documents that would be provided to the board so that they can see it firsthand.
Mr. Safer, with respect to your recommended policy on personnel cooperation with investigations, what I'm unclear about with respect to your draft language, and given here the employee used a school-provided cell phone, and given it did seem you agreed that Mr. Steinert could have requested and obtained his cell phone records from the cell phone company, are you confident that your language here about employees being required to cooperate goes far enough when school equipment is involved, they have the right, but the school board may not have the right, nor the superintendent, to obtain those records?
Well, just to clarify, I think the school board could have obtained the phone records. What the phone records would have shown was a connection between two phones. So you'll have, if you get the subscriber information, you can get this phone number connected with this phone number. You will not get the content.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. And is that true even of the person whose records they are?
Yes.
Okay.
That's true, frankly, of law enforcement. So I cannot subpoena that information unless I have a wire tap on the phone real time.
Okay. Last question. On your last recommended policy of misconduct of district employee, you've been repeatedly emphasizing the need for someone with criminal experience, a know-how, to be involved in this. So I would ask you to look at this, because you're not talking about a criminal investigator, and you're not mentioning getting involved criminal counsel. I understand that one might not want to dictate ahead of time the extent of the involvement of outside criminal counsel, but I think the policy should definitely target, because it's dealing with subject of investigation by law enforcement, where there's a charge of a criminal offense. I think you should specify a criminal investigator, and I think there should be some mention of, because again, people don't know the various specialties of lawyers and what's required for what situation. And I think to give future boards adequate guidance, this policy could maybe be flushed out a little fuller to give them that guidance.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
You know, in Ron's defense, that really wasn't part of the charge. He was actually trying to help out without being asked, and I thank you very much. That certainly is consideration for the policy committee, which is going to be working on that policy. Yes, ma'am.
Debbie Dent again. What is the name of the labor lawyer and his or her firm?
Phil Gerner, and I don't recall the name of his firm.
Okay. And
G-E-R, and I think it, isn't it? I'm sorry. Robin Schwartz.
Okay. Did you review all of the attorney's file, the labor attorney's file on this?
You know, I spoke to him. He gave me all of the information he had. I did not go to his offices and take his files.
You did not ask him for a copy of his file?
He didn't have a file on this. He provided me with all the information that he had.
Did he make any attempt to do any independent investigation, or was he just given a fact pattern by whoever called him? By the way, who did call him?
I don't recall who called him. He did not do independent investigation.
And at your firm, I know the way big law firms work, there were other people, your colleague was involved, there were others involved. May I ask you, were there any women involved in your investigation? In your group?
Not from our firm.
And may I ask you, was there any equivocation about your conclusions or any dissension whatsoever among the lawyers in your firm about your conclusions? And I would like to hear from your colleague if that's possible.
Sure. And no, there wasn't. But Mr. Muhammad would.
We both agreed on what the evidence showed and the conclusions that we reached.
Okay. Your expertise is criminal law? Okay. Did you have a chance to look at Dr. Griffith's employment contract, and is there language that allows for termination of that contract for misconduct of any sort, or what is it called, negligence or is there?
It's not within the scope of our assignment.
Okay, so you as a criminal lawyer investigated the facts. Your conclusions are really your conclusions, your personal conclusions, and they have no authority in case law. They have really no authority. A parent who has kids in this district could take the facts that you gathered and just as legitimately form their own conclusions, could they not?
I assume that you could draw your own conclusions.
And would not an employment lawyer be in a better position to draw those conclusions than you would be?
It's not my judgment, no.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, before you go, is there anyone else who would like to ask questions?
Get me off as quick as you can.
No, ma'am. I'm not going to cut you off. We'll be here all night. I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, please. Oh, Amy? Sure. Come on. Why don't we could trade off a few questions here, a few questions there.
Fine.
All right.
No problem. Thank you.
I guess this question is regarding the new policy that's going to be put in place. I guess I'm just surprised that given that this was brought up in, November, the committee hasn't already started working to formalize something, and we're now just, okay, well, now we'll put together a policy at this point, especially for a district where we expect excellence. Dr. Griffith, you talk about it all the time. We're fundraising for a new, beautiful track and field on that basis. The Spirit raises money. The foundation, the Lake Forest High School Foundation, raises money based on this. And to me, I'm not an attorney. In fact, I was talked out of it when I was going into college. But what I feel is it's just kind of common sense. It's just a ethical, moral decision.
Keep in mind that while this is an important issue, my opinion is it's not an urgent one in that in the history of the district, as far as we can tell, you haven't come across this kind of issue. So the odds that that's going to happen in weeks are probably pretty slim. It's an important issue, but I think one that can be considered.
And
Amy,
John,
if I may say,
you may want to point out that we were waiting for Ron's recommendation.
Yeah, essentially,
I mean, a big part of this was we wanted to find, we wanted the findings from Ron, and we wanted his recommendation as to, a suggestion for a policy. That's going to be the starting point.
And also input from the public is something we were looking for too. So we didn't want to start writing before we understood what the input was that people had.
Right. And with all due respect, we wouldn't have known about any of this had it not hit the papers. So this may be the first time, maybe it's not. So with 4 children in the district, you can understand I kind of would like to see a policy, or at least some sense of urgency in putting something in place to address this or any other issue that may come up. Especially within, is that funny, Pam? I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you were smiling. I guess I would just like to see a sense of urgency, and because these are criminal matters, whether it's sexual harassment or anything else of that matter, I'd like to see it addressed. That's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Amy. Excuse me. Yes, sir.
Not to knock any of my other fellow questioners. I just have one. I want to hit the ball into your court, and you're going to hit it into John's court almost immediately. And all that is I kind of hit on the point earlier. Now that I see the suggestions, what is glaringly missing from this is the suggestion that wherever possible, the public should be notified as early as possible as to what's going on and the weight of the matter. And that's straight to the board, just that weighs heavily for me. No matter what's going on, if you can, tell us. We just would like to know. We're all living this nightmare together. And so it would have been nice to know.
Gary, I appreciate that, and I think it lends itself exactly to what Amy was just discussing. We didn't want to rush through. Hearing this input is very helpful.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name's Brad Seaman. I live at 161 Shawford Way in Lake Forest. My question is really solely focused around how do we prevent this from happening again. And so my question to you is are you aware of any statute in the law or any legal interpretation that one might make with the law that exists that would prevent the board from saying that any time an employee of the school district is charged or convicted with a crime of any type of sexual nature, that they'll be suspended with pay until that is fully resolved and they're exonerated? Because as a parent, my fear is that if someone is, a situation like this where a person, is charged with something sexual in nature, broadly defined, and then has the right to be back in the school without, the full weight of the evidence being shared with the employer, the non-redacted information, et cetera.
Okay, so a couple of things to keep in mind. One is a world of difference between charged and convicted. Mm-hmm. So, charged, at least, here, it is presumed innocent, right, despite the fact that there is a charge, and that is the Constitution. Second, I'm not a labor lawyer, so what can be done with a charge is really a labor law question. One thing that I do know with regard to the policies, because we reviewed them quite carefully, is there is a panoply of policies that would allow actions to be taken if this were in the workplace, or, for example, regarding a minor and had any implications for the workplace, and that was investigated. That's something that action could be taken in accordance with the policies. This issue, whether something could be done with a charge, not a conviction, on a matter unrelated to school, is a labor law question I'm really not competent to answer.
Sure, and again, very, very briefly, just to follow up on that, I think as a parent, it would be, I think, reasonable for the board to say to an employee of the school district who's been charged with some sexual wrongdoing, broadly defined, with anybody, until that situation is fully resolved and all the facts are known, that we can pay them, but they can't be exposed to our children in all meanings of the word. So I think I'd really enjoy if and appreciate through the process of developing the policy that the board consider that, because when we think about the number one priority, which is the safety of the kids, and if they're found innocent, then guess what? Their job, they get their job, they've been paid all the way through, and but if in the event that we allow someone to return to work during a period between charged and convicted of something of a sexual nature, and then they're with our children, I don't think any of us, well, I'll speak just for me. I feel horrible about that and don't think that that's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the public? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Megan Stockton, South Green Bay Road. My question is regarding the policies. I understand that there were no policies for this type of behavior, and I appreciate that we have some concepts going forward with the policies. We've heard the term policy committee, and whoever created the policies in the past. Who creates the policies going forward, and who is that committee comprised of?
I don't know who the current members are of the policy committee. I can tell you, to address one point regarding policies in place. Generally, and I can say this although it's only anecdotal, but I feel fairly confident in this, the vast majority of policies that are in place for the board districts, school districts across the state are promulgated by the state and generally followed almost to a T. So I suspect that if you investigated any district in the state, you would probably not find policies to address this matter.
No,
So,
but going
going forward,
I think it's a good recommendation going forward.
Absolutely.
And so in the past, I believe that the policies are reviewed by the board, correct?
that's correct.
So in this case, because the board was, you mentioned, ignorant of the criminal issues, should there be other people represented on that board outside, I'm sorry, on that
the policy committee?
not board. Should there be other people on the policy committee outside of the board if the public is feeling that things weren't communicated, or whether they knew what they didn't know it?
In the past, so within the last 2 years, we did a major policy review and revision, and we had an IASB person come and work with us on the policies. So first, there were meetings over several months, and because it was a major policy revision, all board members were invited to attend. So she would sit with us and go through all the policies and say, this is required, you have to have this is optional, and we would discuss changing those things. And at that point in time, there was not any policy included that would have addressed this situation that we rejected it. There just was no policy that was recommended by the IASB. And going forward, we still get regular notices from the IASB for recommended policies or required policies as laws change. And so currently the members of the policy committee are John, Julian, Laurie, Rose, and myself. The way we did it the last time was to invite any board members who wanted to be involved in that to attend, and I think that's something that we could consider, or we could even consider having.
But from a criminal standpoint, that there would
right,
be somebody
yeah,
with
so,
that background.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I think we need to take that, under advisement.
Okay, thanks.
I just wanted to add that the board is now consulting more regularly with counsel on these types of matters, and it's my hope, and I believe the full board would agree that it's imperative to do so. In addition to that, all policy is approved by the entire board. So that's going to be a continued policy going forward.
I would say we would also have labor law counsel involved with this as well.
Hi, once again, Michael Beecham, 630 Meadowood. Mr. Safer, you characterized the behavior of the superintendent and the board as being reasonable, within the realm of reasonable behavior, given their...
within the range of reasonable responses.
So would you also say that you think that they were competent?
maybe saying the same thing a different way, but, you know, I don't think they were qualified to investigate a criminal matter.
And did Dr. Griffith or any member of the board help Mr. Steinert to find a criminal attorney?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but I think the suggestion was that he needed a criminal attorney, and that came from the superintendent.
But they decided not to get a criminal attorney for themselves.
Well, right, two very different matters. One person charged with a criminal offense, the other's looking into it.
So the district helped the principal to defend himself, but did not take the necessary steps to defend themselves or protect the interests of the district and the children in the district.
Well, I understand and appreciate the thrust of your argument. They couldn't be further from apples, you know, an apples to apples comparison. In terms of helped, a suggestion to somebody who's charged with a criminal offense, you need a lawyer. I'm not sure that fits a definition of helped. In terms of getting an attorney to guide the board through this, certainly with the benefit of hindsight, that is something that should have been done.
Didn't show competence.
Well, you know, that is certainly your conclusion, apparently, not mine.
Okay, thank you.
Debbie Dent, and there is a question here. I'm following up first on a comment that a woman said earlier about common sense. One of my father's favorite sayings was, common sense is an uncommon thing. Let's forget about privacy laws. Let's forget about criminal laws. Let's forget about laws altogether. Let's look at this. What Dr. Griffith and the board did have, unquestionably, admittedly, in front of them, which is that the principal of a school repeatedly sent sexually explicit text messages to a former intern of the school on a school phone. Now, there is a show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? I think if we took a classroom of fifth graders, astutely trained in Lake Forest, and you asked them, what do you do next? There was a Pandora's box there, undoubtedly, and Dr. Griffith chose not to open that Pandora's box. To say that he did not act wrongfully is to condone the ostrich with his head in the sand. We expect much better from a highly paid superintendent. And quite frankly, I would expect that legal counsel could not honorably come to a conclusion that this was not gross neglect and
Ma'am, I'm sorry,
Right,
what
Miss-
is the question?
Well, the question is, how can you possibly justify that there was not wrongful conduct on Dr. Griffith's part when he obviously had a Pandora's box there, obviously had enough information, and the same superintendent, the same Steinhardt lectured my kids on inappropriate text messaging after he pled guilty.
Okay,
He's up there as a role model to the kids. And let me just say, Dr. Griffith did take the initiative. I know he was busy with health issues, but he did take the initiative to go to the board and ask them to re-up the contract, even though it was decided not to. Yet he couldn't pick up the phone and say, where is this, let me have the full file. It is outrageous to me. This behavior was outrageous, and it was a clear cover-up, and I respectfully request that you reconsider your conclusions, and I respectfully request that the board, after we have a time to read this report, that the board reconvene another meeting to discuss the situation and to employ a labor and employment lawyer. I am one. I do not want to be retained for this, but I would certainly be happy to advise for free, to come to some conclusions here that are not outrageous.
Let me just address one thing. I think I've made the grounds for our findings clear, so I won't go over them again. But the idea that there was an ostrich is one that we looked into. That is, that whether there was willful ignorance. I think it's hard to describe someone who makes a formal FOIA request as somebody who doesn't want to receive the information. I mean, that's what was done. Now, what was received was, and of course, when you make a FOIA request, you do not know what you're going to receive. I assume that request was made to receive all of the police information. There was a redacted report. Now, after the case was over, could the district go back and get the full police report? Yes. Were they aware of that? No. And that's the basis of the conclusions.
Do you have the copy of the redacted report attached to your report?
I don't have it attached to my report.
Would you make it available to us, please?
No, I don't.
Why not?
Because it's not part. There are a lot of things.
You were very evidently trying to hide the negative facts here. I would ask you to play devil's advocate and argue for the other side.
That's
use your years of judgment as a lawyer, very esteemed, good lawyer at that. Use that Georgetown education, and you play devil's advocate, and you tell me why the board and Dr. Griffith did engage in wrongful conduct here.
Ma'am, I appreciate your opinion. Are there other questions? I don't know what that question was.
To play devil's advocate and come up with reasons going the other way.
That's exactly how I approach this. I approach this problem as to investigate. I spent, as I said, for better or for worse, spent 10 years as an assistant U.S. attorney. I investigated all kinds of misconduct. I investigated politicians who have taken bribes. I investigated bank frauds. I investigated the largest gang in the nation, the largest gang the nation has ever known. The idea that I would sacrifice the reputation that I have worked for all those years to get, when I literally put my life on the line for I'm not sure what, but to cover up something here is silly. But the approach that I took is exactly that which I took when I investigated as a prosecutor. That is there evidence of wrongdoing? Many times, by the way, that I zealously took after that trail, the conclusion was, when I was a prosecutor, no. And no charges were filed in those cases. In this case, I took the exact same approach. I did what you asked at the inception of this assignment. I said, was there wrongdoing? I looked for any evidence of wrongdoing that I could find. I evaluated what I found. I found that the investigation was not thorough. I found that there was no misconduct, wrongful conduct.
Thank you, Ron. Are there any other questions for Ron? All right, thank you very much, Ron. Obviously, we've heard Ron's report, and apparently he did not reach the conclusion that some people wanted him to reach, but he was an investigative investigator who was independent in judgment, and that was the reason that we had selected Ron. The subcommittee and the full board had previously been given an oral report substantially the same as the one that Ron just gave you tonight. The results of the investigation are now public. The written report is made available to the public, and the exact and only written report that's been given to the board. Mr. Safer concluded that there was no violation of existing district policies, although he acknowledged that no policy was in place that would have appropriately addressed the criminal aspects of the John Steinert matter, specifically how to pursue an investigation of a district employee's criminal conduct, which conduct takes place outside of the scope of the employee's employment. Consequently, Mr. Safer recommends that the district adopt policies which would provide more appropriate direction in the event of similar circumstances, and in fact has drafted and proposed 2 new policies. Finally, and maybe most importantly, Mr. Safer, after extensive investigation and multiple interviews, has concluded that there was no wrongdoing by the administration or the board in its handling of the matter back in 2009. There was no cover-up, there was no concealment of facts, there was no intentional disregard of information. In short, while hindsight may allow others to second-guess actions taken at the time, handling of the matter in 2009 was undertaken by the board and administration in good faith and in accordance with the guidance available at the time. With Mr. Safer's report, the subcommittee considers the investigation of this matter to be concluded. Following Mr. Safer's lead, however, it is the subcommittee's recommendation that the board's policy committee be directed to review the district policies and, in light of Mr. Safer's report, recommend to the board appropriate amendments to better guide the board in circumstances involving a district employee's criminal conduct, which conduct takes place outside of the scope of the employee's employment. We thank Mr. Safer and Mr. Muhammad for their work, and we look forward now to moving forward to more positive missions for the district.
Excuse me, the council has admitted that he is not a labor and employment council, and there is a request
Ma'am,
that you reconsider.
this has been concluded. Thank you.
Well,
You had your moment.
are you ever going to respond to those?
Not now, I'm not. Do any of the members of the subcommittee have anything to add? Okay. That's it, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And now we move on to board committees. We start with the Board Education Committee, Lesley Fisher and Bill Andersen.
Thank you. And I take no offense to those who have been here for a while and who want to leave. You're welcome to stay. The District 67 Education Committee meeting, we met on Tuesday, February 14th here at Lake Forest High School West Campus from 8:15 to 10:15. Participants were Dr. Andy Henriksen, Colleen Brueggemann, our Director of Gifted Services, Bill Andersen and myself represented the Board of Education, and community members Amy Lazzarato and Patrick Patt were present. We heard 3 reports to the Education Committee that morning, the first of which came from Dr. Andy Henriksen, and you've already heard it tonight, so eloquently by Dr. Andy Henriksen himself, as well as Carolyn Krummis and the 4 very articulate teachers who shared tonight on National Common Core Standards and Park Assessment. And the committee agreed that we are very excited for this move in 2014 to 2015. We also heard a report from Colleen Brueggemann, our Director of Gifted Services, on the grades 5-6 math level revision. She discussed the proposed restructuring of DPM East's math program. First, what is now called standard, the level at where over 50% of our middle school students receive math instruction, will be renamed core because it is the district's core math curriculum. The administration feels that the label standard has become a misnomer since finishing algebra in 8th grade, these students are actually advanced compared to their state and national peers. A second proposed change comes out of the feedback from parents, teachers, and students. Currently, in 5th grade, a student moves over from the elementary school and is placed in either standard, advanced, or advanced plus math. By the time these students get to 7th grade, advanced and advanced plus students are in the classroom together and indistinguishable by their 7th grade teachers. The proposal here is that upon entering 5th grade, those students who have in the past been separated as advanced or advanced plus will be in class together. There will continue to be differentiation within the classroom for students who are ahead of the majority or who need extra help to catch up to the rest. Mrs. Brueggemann commented that there is an increasing focus on articulation between 4th and 5th grade to ensure proper 5th grade placement. During 5th grade, students are also moved into different placement if educational needs dictate. On March 21st, Mrs. Brueggemann will be presenting these proposed changes at an open meeting to parents, and in April, she intends to host a coffee where questions or concerns regarding the above changes can be addressed. Colleen also spoke about using IB directed units and lessons to enhance student learning at all grade levels. Some teachers have already begun to incorporate some of these teachings into their classrooms. Colleen and Dr. Ingrid Weimer, principal at Everett School, have attended workshops related to IB and report back to the staff in order to promote the practices of IB schools. Colleen and students from Everett School presented an IB-inspired lesson on water at our January board meeting. This can be viewed on our district website. The last report we heard that morning was the report from the District Goals Workshop for 2012 and 2013. Here, the District Goals Workshop focused on 4 themes for the upcoming school year. The 4 themes are as follows: 2020 vision, the Common Core standards and PARC assessment, emotional wellness, and Mandarin immersion. The 2020 vision includes initiatives related to instructional technology, including the expansion of the netbook pilot into grade 7 and maybe even grade 8, the expanded use of iPads in elementary schools, and the development of what we are calling the Cube, the new creativity, collaboration, and communication space that will be located in the DPM East section of the building, currently used for Time Zone. This initiative is very exciting, and we'll be hearing more about it in the future. Would you like to say anything about that, Dr. Griffith or Andy, at this time? Okay. Okay, you're right. For the sake of time, we'll hold that off. Common Core standards and PARC assessment, we've heard about. For emotional wellness, some of the initiatives include expanded web training for Where Everyone Belongs, our program at the middle school, advisory curriculum development, and bully prevention and intervention, including that related to social media. And in fact, last Friday, an Institute Day was spent with our teachers working on this. Another theme, lastly, is the Mandarin immersion. And for Mandarin immersion, I have a couple of quotes from parents who were asked about Mandarin immersion. These parents have students currently in the Mandarin immersion program. When parents were posed with the following question, what are some reasons our families consider enrolling their children in our Mandarin immersion program? The answers were as follows. We believe it has a positive impact on brain development. Mandarin will be the dominant language in the world. We seek the opportunity to be with like-minded families and children who value a multicultural and multilingual philosophy. It will be easier for children to learn other languages. In April, the Education Committee meeting will meet once again on April 17th at 8:15. Committee members were given the book, Catching Up or Leading the Way, American Education in the Age of Globalization, and we will come to our next meeting prepared to share key points from this book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lesley. That brings us to the Board Operations Committee and Laurie Rose and Rick Schuler.
Our Board Operations Committee has not met since our last Board of Education meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 6th at 8:30 at a location to be determined. It will be posted on the web. And among other agenda items, we will be considering the overview of school security. This concludes the operations report.
Thank you, Laurie. The Board Finance Committee, Jeff Pinderski and John Julian.
The Board Finance Committee met on February 10th, and present were myself, John Julian, community members Keith Levanway and Mike Borkowski, Harry Griffith, Alan Albus, Jennifer Hermes, and community member Patrick Pat. I think you're still back there. The meeting was called to order at 7:30, and the January minutes were approved. Alan Albus presented, and the team discussed 5-year financial projections. We are holding up fairly well as fund balances have built up in the last few years in anticipation of the dip associated with expiration of the TIF district. The committee also reviewed our inventory of scenarios over which the district has limited control but could influence cash flow and fund balances. And I'll just kind of tick these off because they're things we need to keep an eye on. These situations include additional changes to pensions and state aids, the cost of the regional superintendent's office being pushed to the districts rather than the state, refreshing our facilities after several years of deferred maintenance, the outcomes of negotiation with our 3 collective bargaining entities later this year, enrollment increases as the housing market improves and new families move to the community, the continued low interest earnings on our reserve accounts, and costs associated with new state-mandated curriculum and how it affects the buildings, right? Because there'll probably be some build-outs as a result of this. In the future, maintaining this inventory of contingencies and their potential effect on delivering quality education services will continue to be a core activity of the Finance Committee. Alan also reported that the Board Operations Committee has been visiting schools in order to see firsthand some of the capital improvements the district is facing. The group discussed that many improvements were made to each school through Project 2000 almost 12 years ago, and this led to a discussion regarding addressing deferred maintenance issues and other capital items. Dr. Griffith reported that negotiation with unions will report soon. Jennifer reported that both district finance committees, us and 115, 67 and 115, endorsed a 1-year contract extension with Miller Cooper, our certified public accountants, and that's in the action items that I'll ask the board to take this evening. And our meeting adjourned about 8:30. There's one other item that I want to go over, and that is the impact of shared services. As all of you know, I'm sure you know, recently a new superintendent has been hired, and I want to just run through the figures associated with the new superintendent and shared services. And so this will be pretty quick. Before shared services came about during the 2003-2004 school year, superintendent compensation for District 67 was approximately $230,000. The superintendent compensation paid this year is approximately $147,000, basically half of the superintendent, the other half paid by District 115. Excuse me, and that'll be for the next superintendent, approximately $147,000. So this represents a decrease of about $81,000 over the last 10 years due to shared services, a decrease of about 1/3. And the goal here is to redirect those funds back towards the classroom, and this is a pretty nice example of, just taking one item out of the shared services and describing how it produces savings along with better results and better articulation between the two districts. So that concludes the district finance report.
Julia, can I add one point?
Sure.
I was a little disappointed early on in the meeting when one of the community members felt like he couldn't get the financial information. I just want to reiterate, it's all available online. That said, I understand there may be a lot of people that don't go online, and I totally get that, but anybody that's not online that can't see it should be able to and can get a written copy of it. So we, the board, and Alan and Jennifer and the administrators, nobody doesn't want this information available, and feedback is welcome, and it is available in either form. But the reason it's not sent to everyone, once a year or quarterly in writing is, of course, a cost issue.
yes.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks
for
for
adding
clearing
that,
that.
Rick.
Yeah, and it saves a lot of trees. I mean, everything has to go this way. It's just a waste.
Yeah, thank you very much, both Jeff and Rick. That brings us then to our district committees in which we act as liaisons. First, we have the North Suburban Special Education District and Jeff Pinderski.
Late in January, the North Suburban Special Education District met and approved a new service model where the membership fees for being part of the cooperative will drop significantly, and the fee per student will increase slightly. Since District 67 only uses NSSED for 4 students, this provides a windfall to the district. In addition, the membership fee also enables our teachers the ability to consult with NSSED experts, training opportunities, professional development, and in the case that we do get a child or two that really needs the special services that NSSED supplies, we will always have a spot available for them. So I think that's a very wise investment. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Julie Cooley for somehow making that all happen. Alan, I think you might have had something to do with it too. So a real success story. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And now we go to the Illinois Association of School Boards and Ed Red, Bill Andersen.
Thank you. I do have a report this month. Along with several board members and Dr. Griffith, I attended a conference sponsored by the law firm Franczek Radelet, which represents the Lake Forest school districts as well as several numerous other Illinois districts. The firm's senior partner, Jim Franczek, spoke on a number of school-related legislative issues. Pension reform is one of the most important of these, and after years of discussion may be enacted this year. One proposal we should be aware of was mentioned by House Speaker Madigan in a recent speech which has received much attention. Madigan raised the possibility that school districts should assume a significant responsibility for their own pension expenses rather than have them paid almost entirely by the state. As Speaker Madigan pointed out, the state contributed $4 billion to the Illinois pension system last year, with roughly $2 billion of that going to teacher pensions. With our state government facing chronic budget problems, the temptation to push a large portion of this to local school districts is understandable. I'd be pleased to share information about pension reform with members of the Finance Committee at their convenience. In another legislative development, a new bill called SB 2073 was recently passed by the Illinois House of Representatives. SB 2073 would limit the amount of tax increases, in terms of dollars, not rates, in districts where property values have fallen. Essentially, it would say that districts could set the tax rate at a level which would match the previous year's revenue, but not allow an increase. This bill is similar to another one, HB 3793, which was introduced last fall and defeated. If SB 2073 were passed into law, our understanding is it would keep our districts from making their own determinations of whether the tax level would be allowed to keep up with inflation. It isn't considered likely this bill would make it through the Senate and on to Governor Quinn, but as this is an election year, there could be an unexpected result, so it's worth monitoring. On February 6th, I attended a dinner featuring a presentation by Charlotte Danielson, who is recognized nationally as the leading expert on the topic of teacher evaluation. Her presentation was extremely informative, and I'd call your attention to the EdRed website, which currently has the slides she presented. The issue of teacher evaluation is very timely nationally, but especially in Illinois because of the passage of the Education Reform Act of 2011. The act puts an increased responsibility on school districts to monitor teacher performance. Danielson gave an insightful presentation which covered the challenges of designing a teacher evaluation method which is meaningful, i.e. it consistently and accurately measures teacher effectiveness, practical, meaning one which can be realistically implemented on a large scale, collaborative, and fair. Her framework for teaching was one of the models used by the Gates Foundation in its comprehensive MET study, which evaluated the effectiveness of 23,000 teachers. Her framework is divided into 4 domains: planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibility. I'm pleased to report that District 67 has been working with parts of the Danielson framework and is considering adopting it as the primary methodology for teacher evaluation. We are fortunate to have Joe Malin here from the district who will say a few words about this important topic.
Good evening. Bill, that was very comprehensive, so I won't have a large amount to add. However, Charlotte Danielson is someone who I'd say almost has a legendary status now within the educational community. So I'm a bit jealous that you were able to see her in person. We've been studying her within our some of her ideas and her work through our evaluation committee. As you mentioned, the framework for teaching, we've been really studying carefully and looking at potentially adopting that in 2012-13. I think to me one of the most amazing things of it is, as you heard today, about just the complexities of teaching. You know, there's so much to it, and this is someone who's been able to come up with a framework for organizing how to think about it, though, in terms of domains and specific elements that are measurable and observable. That we can utilize from an evaluation standpoint, but also from a professional growth standpoint. So definitely feeling that Charlotte Danielson has much to offer us in terms of as we embark on evaluation approaches that will be consistent with new law as well. So hopefully that added a little bit of information at least.
Thank you, Joe. If I could just ask, you mentioned you're going to get some more training in the Danielson method this week or something, right?
Oh yeah, it just so happens that I'm going tomorrow to the Regional Office of Education to get training, and that's kind of I should have mentioned that's kind of one of our big pieces now is how do we get people trained so that they can be able to implement most effectively. So that's been our approach so far, as we're getting trained as we can, but we're looking at a systematic approach for that as well to make sure that all evaluators are fully able to implement effectively, and we're able to have reliability across our different raters. So.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
That concludes my report.
Hold on. So Bill, I got a question, not to put you on the spot, but one of the things that concerns me is that State Bill 2073, which puts a cap on our ability to, to limit taxes, right?
That's correct.
When there's no
when the property values are falling. And there's a good piece to that as a homeowner and a bad piece to that. Did you get a sense of the probability of that passing anytime soon, or is this one of these trial balloons?
Well, again, it came up in the fall in the October meeting of the legislature. It's very popular right now because a lot of people are in a position where their house has fallen by 30% and their taxes have gone up by 20%. So they feel like that doesn't seem right because taxes went up when their house was appreciating, and now their house is collapsing in value and taxes are still going up. So it's understandable. But I think it's one of those things that when people think about it a little bit more, they lose a lot of local control. And so the reasons that it doesn't, when you think about it some more, it doesn't sound as good. So it made it not very far in October. This time it made it through the House, which I think surprised people. But according to our EdRed, which supplies most of the information I have on this, they still don't consider it likely that it'll make it through the rest of the legislative process.
Yeah, Bill, it's been rejected by the Senate. So, in fact, strongly rejected. So, it's not likely to emerge at this time in that form.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. A collaborative report. And next we have professional development and Rick Schuler.
We're going to wait till next month for a more complete report.
Okay, thank you, Rick. The Curriculum Coordinating Committee and Laurie Rose.
Thank you, Julia. Our Curriculum Coordinating Committee met in the last possible winter snowstorm on February 23rd, and the sole item we considered was the core standards, which you heard an elaborate report about earlier this evening, so I won't go into that. I just wanted to make a couple of short points. One is that, as was evident from the report, your educators are already doing a lot of the things that are nationally now only being recognized. The fact that we have independently started working on 21st century goals with technology will only assist us in taking the next steps. Also, the curriculum committee has, which I've served on for a number of years, has always been reevaluating new textbooks, for example, as the ways in which we teach social studies change, but this gives us an opportunity to really address critical thinking and the kind of student that we need by the time they graduate in quite a different way. So I think, as you saw earlier, it was very stimulating, and I think the development of new texts and new digital materials that will support the core curriculum nationally will give us a lot of additional material to choose from as a district. And the final point I want to make is we will choose as a district, despite the fact that this is a national initiative which is gaining a lot of steam and certain categories of literature might be recommended. The choices will always remain with your educators locally and continue to be influenced by the core values of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. The Spirit of 67 Foundation. The Spirit held its regular meeting, on, I believe it was, I'm sorry, I have a typo in my, in early February. And as of the end of January, the Spirit had received $115,445 in donations, and that represents a participation rate of 42% of our district families. One thing I would like to talk about, and the Spirit discussed this, was that they are focused on the percentage of families participating, because it's very important when they are seeking corporate donations. So the closer that is to 50%, or getting above 50%, really helps for those volunteers and parents who are trying to talk to corporations about donations. So to anyone who is interested in joining the Spirit, even a $10 donation raises that participation rate. In addition, I've been a part of the grants committee, and we've spent close to 20 hours already reviewing the grants. It is a very exciting and educational process. For me, especially as I do not have children in the schools, I learn a lot about the day-to-day and what's happening in our schools. So I really like serving on the grants committee. There is one thing that is, and I have to say, the insightful questions and discussion that occurs regarding those grants is very educational. The one thing that the grants committee has noticed is that we are receiving very few, almost none, grants in the area of science and math, and we're kind of throwing ideas around about how to increase the awareness in the science and math departments. And one of the questions was, there are teacher liaisons that serve every year on the Spirit, and maybe if some science and math teachers were chosen as liaisons, they might be more aware of the grant writing process and how the Spirit works. So I wanted to just throw that out there. Oh, yeah.
You know, part of the sense that there haven't been math and science grants is a bit of a misnomer, because we categorized last year's grants in those fields as technology. We had some major science pro scopes for the elementary purchases there, and as well as probably $10,000 to $15,000 purchased for math teachers in the middle school and whiteboards or smartboard technology. So we did take the year off, though. We'll get back on that horse.
Okay, so we're feeling that this is just an odd year. Okay. But I thought that was good input to, I don't know how the teachers are chosen, but to kind of. We thought maybe if we did another one this year, we might be considered greedy. Okay. Yeah, okay, yes, I remember that one. Okay. And that concludes the Spirit of 67 Foundation report. Are there any other committees or meetings that board members attended and would like to now report on?
Well, hey, it's the APT meeting. The on February 8th, I attended the APT Executive Board meeting held here at the Administrative Center. Officers and building presidents, updates, reports were presented, and along with committee reports. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but every time I go to one of these meetings, I'm thankful for the people who care about and contribute to this wonderful community of ours. So thanks to everybody that does that. I provided board updates on the superintendent search, the Ron Safer investigation, and finance and financial matters. Nobody was terribly interested in finance, and I really couldn't give any answers on either Mr. Safer or the superintendent search. But we did go through the process of, what happened to the community input, the 39 people from the community that gave input, and and that it really did matter. And just for those of you that weren't part of the process, 39 people met with the superintendent candidates all day, and I reported to the APT Executive Committee that we took all the notes that they wrote, and they were copied really quickly, and board members came in here at 4:15, grabbed them, literally they were warm, hot off the press, and just tore through them, reading the comments, and they were unbelievably helpful in the decision process. So thanks again, and I hope you'll have me back again soon.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Any others? Okay, that brings us to recommendations, the approval of auditing services contract renewal. Dr. Griffith.
Okay, board members also, thank you for the committee reports. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in the school district, constantly working at continuous improvement. So thank you for that. Our first recommendation from tonight will come from Alan Aubus. It is a recommendation for renewal of auditing services.
Thank you. At the Joint Finance Committee meeting held on January 10th, both committees endorsed a one-year extension with Miller Cooper for audit services for 2011-2012. In your packet is a copy of the proposed fee request, which represents a 3% increase and is the first increase in the past 2 years. The fee proposal was endorsed by the District 67 Finance Committee at the February 10th meeting.
Sorry, I was distracted. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the auditing services contract renewal?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Andersen?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Julian?
Aye.
Mr. Pinderski?
Aye.
Mrs. Rose?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
And Mrs. Wold?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. This brings us to the approval of the 2013-14 school calendar. Dr. Griffith?
Thank you, Madam President. Board members, we adopt our calendar on a 2-year basis. We do have a calendar committee in the school district that has worked on the 2013 and 14 school calendar, and Andy Hendrickson will report that calendar for tonight as our recommendation.
Actually, credit goes to Paul Szymanski and Julie Meadows, who were co-chairing that committee. We had representation from teachers and administration putting this together, and then ran it by APT presidents, I believe. And this is what we're looking at as a first proposal to you. I guess the major change here is that we're looking at 2 days of in-service at the beginning of the school year as opposed to 3. So the 26th and 27th, August of 2013, followed by the first half day of school on the 28th. And then I won't go through all the holidays, but you can see here in red we've got the holidays, Labor Day, Columbus Day. The yellow markings here in November, that's a half day for students and a records day for teachers as we near the end of the first trimester. And then we have 2 days, 25th and 26th, prior to Thanksgiving, which would be for parent-teacher conferences. So this full week off for students.
Board members, this is a normal calendar for us. One real change is in front of the Good Friday. What do we call that in Illinois? We call that a day of non-attendance. There's a school improvement day there for teachers, and that it's a good opportunity do goal setting with our staff for the next year, and that will be on April 17th, or no,
Right.
yeah, April 17th.
April 17th.
Otherwise, the calendar is pretty much in keeping with the parameters that we've followed in the past.
Right, it aligns with Lake Forest High School, and it's pretty solid.
Any questions? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the 2013-14 school calendar?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, we have the approval of an employee disciplinary notice. This was discussed in our executive session prior to the meeting. May I have a motion to approve a notice of remedial warning and suspension without pay to a tenured teacher?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call? A roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Julian,
Aye.
Mrs. Wold,
Aye.
Mr. Andersen,
Aye.
Mr. Schuler,
Aye.
Mrs. Rose,
Aye.
Mr. Pinderski,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries unanimously. Next, we come to the consent agenda items, starting with the approval of minutes of a regular board meeting on January 24th, an executive session on January 24th, minutes of an executive session on February 1st, minutes of a special meeting on February 13th, which I'm going to ask be withdrawn from the consent agenda. And minutes of an executive session on February 13th. And then we have the approval of disbursements, payrolls, and financial statement with January 2011. We have January disbursements totaling $1,672,121.44. And we have payrolls in January totaling $1,408,781.58. We have the January 2012 financial report. We have the approval of human resources items. And with regards to the records of our closed meetings, we are not disposing of any audio recordings. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the minutes from February 13th withdrawn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Pinderski,
Aye.
Mrs. Rose,
Aye.
Mr. Schuler,
Aye.
Mr. Andersen,
Aye.
Mrs. Wold,
Aye.
Mr. Julian.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, board members, the reason I withdrew the minutes is that the minutes have been amended, and we have a copy of them in front of you, and it's that little tag that says sign here. Those are the changes, and I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of those changes. Is everyone comfortable voting on this, the amended minutes? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the amended minutes from February 13th?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Brings us to FOIA requests. We had FOIA requests from Adrian Fawcett in Lake Bluff, Lisa Black of the Chicago Tribune, Jill Sampson of Xerox Corporation, and Matt Armstrong from Streamwood, Illinois. Future agenda items. Is there any item that a board member would like placed on a future agenda? Seeing none, we come to announcements. Thursday, March 1st, are parent-teacher conferences with half-day student attendance. Friday, March 2nd, are parent-teacher conferences, no school. March 5th through 16 is ISAT testing in grades 3 through 8, which we now know will not be occurring in a couple of years. And Tuesday, March 20th is our, that's our next Board of Education meeting at 7 p.m. here at Lake Forest High School West Campus in the boardroom. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. I would like to call to order the City of Lake Forest School District Number 67 Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, February 28 at 2012. We did hold an executive session at 5 p.m.
May I have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Andersen,
Present.
Mrs. Fisher,
Present.
Mr. Julian,
Here.
Mr. Pinderski,
Here.
Mrs. Rose,
Present.
Mr. Schuler,
Here.
Mrs. Wold,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. And welcome to our audience. It's nice to see a full room. I would like to start with the President's report and basically just share with you the Board of Education liaisons and how board members, I'm not sure all of you are familiar with this role, but it is an APT position. And each school has 2 representatives that serve on the APT as the Board of Education liaisons. They regularly attend our board meetings, and they report back to their APTs about the work of the board. In addition to that, 3 times a year, the liaisons meet together with Dr. Griffith, Ann Whipple, and the board president, myself. And prior to this meeting, they gather questions from the parents at their schools and go over those questions from the parents. So this provides a consistent opportunity for two-way dialogue with our parent leaders. The topics that were covered in January, we held the meeting on January 25th at 9 a.m. And the topics discussed were 21st century skills and a discussion about the appropriateness of using technology in schools, the format of our half-day kindergarten. There were questions about whether or not it would be extended to include lunch and recess, which it will not be. Discussion about the reason why netbooks were chosen over the iPads, and primarily that was because of the need for a keyboard. And questions about, does the high school track which colleges and universities Lake Forest students get accepted to on their website? And they do. It's on the high school website. In addition, concerns were shared about the current netbook savvy 5th and 6th grades and how it will work when they transition to the high school. So we will be having another one of those meetings in probably April or May, I would presume, Dr. Griffith. And that concludes the President's report. Thank you. Moving on to the Superintendent's report.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, and members of the audience, thank you for being here tonight. Just a couple of quick things. First of all, congratulations to our schools, our faculty, our families. The State Board of Education is commending our schools for sustaining academic excellence as defined by our scores on the state ISAT scores, the Illinois standards for academic testing that we have every year. And so it requires a minimum of 90% of our students meeting or exceeding state standards. So congratulations to our students. And then secondly, I think we should do a shout out to the APT for their book drive that they had. I'm not sure many people yet know that our District 67 APT book drive was a huge success, as more than 20,000 children's books were collected and donated by District 67 students. So let's thank our families for that. The books will be donated to the Bernie's Book Bank, and then from there will be distributed to families that have need of books, and schools too. So congratulations to the APT for that. And then finally, on a very different note, I would just like to issue from the bottom of our hearts condolences to the family of William Lescario-Tuskowski. There was a tragedy this morning in the Lake Forest community when one of our students, there was an accident at with a train this morning. And so our deepest sympathies to the family, and as well as from the rest of the Lake Forest community mourning the loss of this wonderful student. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Griffith. This brings us to public participation. At this time, we're going to have public participation about any topic other than the Ron Safer independent report. So if anyone would like to address the board on any other topic,
please come to the microphone, identify yourself by stating your name and address. And we're going to limit it to 3 minutes tonight, okay?
Hi, Michael Beecham, 630 Meadowood Drive in Lake Forest. I just have a question. Will Mr. Safer be taking questions
Yes.
after his report?
Yes, he will. I'm sorry, I meant to say that.
Thank you.
Doug Morrow, 1806 Bowling Green Drive, Lake Forest. Here's a concerned citizen. I've noticed that we have secured our buildings during the day. We have TV cameras and buzzers to get into the building to protect our kids. We also have high-speed data links between all the municipal buildings and the schools. So I was surprised, and I live by the Everett School. I was very surprised to read that Everett School was broken into with $20,000 of computer equipment taken and the office vandalized and petty cash stolen. I'm surprised with all this technology that we didn't know about this until a teacher came by to see it, and I'm wondering what's being done to improve the physical security of our schools when the kids aren't there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This is the first major vandalizing that within memory, decades. And we do not have cameras around the facilities, our elementary schools, nor the middle school. We do at the high school. We have about 120 cameras at the high school. So the board operations committee will be meeting. There's 2 board members here tonight, and as well as some of our parents who serve on the committee. And we're going to be making a recommendation to address this for all of our schools. Because of the material and the purchasing that's involved, this would be a summer operation.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Debbie Dent, West Old Elm. As a mother, I am very much grieving right now as my children are at home today, and this is the second suicide in 50 days, and then there was another one about a year ago. It's very, very disturbing to the town and to the kids. Years ago, I raised to Dr. Griffith and many officials, and I have no idea whether there's any causation, but if somebody's committing suicide the morning of final exams, it seems more than a coincidence that it might have been driven by stress of school. I would like to request that this school district do what I requested Dr. Griffith to look into 7 or 8 years ago, which is whether there can be a way that to take some of the stress off of our students. There is a lot of waste in the homework that they are giving and everything else, and this town has paid no attention to it. So I ask if there could be something done, and maybe if there could be some sort of suicide hotline set up, or kids to kids, something that I did in high school, and it was very effective. We had a hotline, and it was anonymous, and something for the kids. That's what it's all about. Thank you.
Thank you for that input. And I think we're all grieving. It's a very sad thing to lose a member of our community. Okay, so that brings us to the end of public. Oh, yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've lived in this community for about 50 years, a little more than...
Sir,
Pardon?
can you please state your name and address?
My name is Jack Ingersoll. I live at 1130 North Green Bay Road in Lake Forest. I've lived here for about 50 years, a little bit longer than that. During that time, I've never seen a financial report of any nature from the city or from the school boards, similar to what a corporation would put out, where you list the source and application of funds, the payrolls of the major salaried people, very similar to a P&L and a balance sheet that a corporation has to put out. Are any of you familiar with a corporation? Do any of you work for a corporation? Do you understand what I'm talking about? The city says that they put one out, but they never really, it's put out on your computer but they never send it out to the public. And I think it's time, we're all stockholders in the city here, and we pay the taxes, and the schools are really probably where most of our taxes go to. And I think it's about time that we get a financial report similar to a corporation. I come from the corporate world. I've run a corporation. And if you have problems with it, I'm sure there's people in the community that can help you devise the report. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Do the rest of you?
Sure. Do you want me to just to field this one? I'm Jeff Pinderski, and I'm chair of the Finance Committee. And we have a very detailed budget, which is posted annually. And then month by month, we report variance to the budget, sources and uses of revenue, and then we go through an annual audit process.
Do you list plant and equipment, assets?
Oh, yeah. So where's Alan? Alan, why don't you grab a microphone? Alan is essentially our CFO, and the similarities between what's done here and what happens in there's a lot of similarities between what happens here and what happens in the corporate world. Our chart of accounts is prescribed, and we have a few extra rules. It's kind of the municipal equivalent of Sarbanes-Oxley. Is that fair to say? So would you just take a minute and introduce yourself and address that?
Well, Jeff, let me help. Sir, Alan Albus is our Director of Finance for the school district. Everything that you're asking for is on our website, but if Alan could connect with you, he can go over all that with you, and you can assist him by looking at that. So.
Well, as you're all aware, we receive this almost monthly or quarterly a little thing from the mayor that really says how the city's doing and all that sort of thing. Why can't you, at the year end, give us a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement, and also a source and application, the salaries of the top 10 people in the school district, so forth and so on, all the fringes, our unfunded pension liabilities, so forth and so on, so that we set out what we're facing in the school district. I think that's especially critical in these times where most cities are having budget problems.
Are you starting from the point presuming that this is not being done, or do you think the issue is
I've never seen any.
Excuse me, or is the issue do you perceive the issue as a communications issue?
I think it's probably a communications issue, and I sort of suspect that a lot of the information that we need isn't provided. But it certainly should be something that is mailed to the residents instead of putting it on a computer and so forth. Some of the older people, I'm 84 years old. I don't use one of those things.
I think maybe the issue is this
Pardon?
information is online, and maybe what you're asking is...
But I want it for the entire community so that they can see it. Do you see? As I understand, the greater portion of our taxes go to the schools in the city. Is that correct? Then we should know how money is spent. What is the budget? Is it 10 million? Is it 20 million? What is it? What is our capital equipment? Where's the money and where's it coming from? What is our unfunded pension liabilities here?
We have all the information, sir, and it sounds